The manhwa unfolds in a ruthless realm where the strong ceaselessly shed the blood of the weak. In this world of unending carnage, only those with overwhelming power can endure and rise above the chaos. In a dark, dense forest, a creature that looks like a deer is feeding peacefully. But what it doesn't know is that it's being watched and has already been marked as prey by hunters. Hidden in the bushes, our main character gets ready to shoot as someone advises him to stay calm. He then pulls the bowstring back with all his might, preparing for the perfect shot. His companion gives the signal and he lets the arrow fly toward the defenseless animal. However, right as he shoots, a loud sound echoes through the forest and the creature gets spooked by the noise, which sparked the frustration of the instructor, who screamed his name in despair mixed with anger. The man scolded his student severely for failing to catch the prey and breaking the bow instead, while he tried to salvage the situation with a nervous laugh, claiming the bow broke too easily, perhaps due to its age. However, this excuse did not find acceptance with the instructor, who fumed with anger and regret, asserting that he had bought this bow, which he named Angela, new only a week ago. The instructor surrendered to despair, noting that he had known from the first moment that the young man's desire to learn hunting was without a real goal, wondering about the motive that makes someone of the nobility insist on taking up hunting, and suggesting he learn swordsmanship as a more suitable alternative for his social status. Johan replied realistically that skill in swordsmanship does not yield money until its wielder is hired, then suddenly cut his speech short to suggest moving to another location in search of money, which he sees as the only means of survival in this world he described as corrupt. The truth is that this young man is Johan Eitz, originally named Kim Johan, and he reincarnated in this world after his death in a sudden accident. Despite being a noble, his situation was thorny. He sits at the bottom of his family's hierarchy, with no hope of inheriting a name or wealth. Rather, his utmost ambition is to survive without being stripped of his clothes and expelled during his siblings' struggles for power. But the bigger problem was lurking for them at that moment, as his companion stopped him suddenly with features clad in anxiety, pointing in panic to a pack of wild wolves devouring corpses in the darkness. Suddenly, Johan shoots an arrow at the wolves, but the problem is that the arrow didn't hit any of them, but rather made those wolves notice their location. In a scene reflecting the cruelty of reality, he realized that this world he reincarnated into is characterized by the realism of the Middle Ages, with all its details, and excessive brutality where the dead find no rest even after their perishing. While he wondered if those bodies belonged to people from their village amidst a state of uncertainty, his companion tells him something that cements a single conviction in him that accepts no doubt, that the weak in this world are nothing but prey for the strong. Johan tightened his handstrap firmly, determined not to be prey in this era, and certain of his desperate need for money. At the beginning of his arrival, he wished to possess superpowers or a status window like the heroes of stories, but when he realized this world was devoid of such fantasies, he shifted his goal entirely toward gathering wealth. Money is his key to leaving this province and doing whatever pleases him, whether becoming a merchant or a free farmer, so he decided with obvious eagerness to collect every coin his hand falls upon, whatever the cost. While his eyes shone with a passion for money, his companion called him to show him a plant he found, explaining that it was Little Devil's Grass, a rare herb excellent for stopping bleeding and increasing alertness. While the hunter was boasting of his vast knowledge of herbs, he interrupted him with a single question betraying his material priorities, saying it must be expensive. Johan picked up the plant happily and placed it in his quiver just as he would money. The companion noticed something on the ground, so he picked it up and asked him if this bundle of herbs belongs to him. He denied ownership of it, which sparked the companion's astonishment, who asserted that no one dares to venture this deep into the forest except them. Concluding in shock that someone else was here, their confusion was cut short by a terrifying scream piercing the silence of the forest, freezing the companion in place from the severity of the shock. The two rushed toward the source of the sound to find a horrifying scene, where a child was screaming for help while clinging to a tree branch, surrounded by a pack of starving wolves from every side. The terrified girl's screams rose, asking for rescue from this deadly predicament. The companion Joseph recognized the girl, explaining that she was Dale, daughter of Robert, and wondered in amazement why a child was in this dangerous place. Faced with the large number of wolves, terror took hold of him, so he suggested to his master that they retreat immediately and call for support due to their inability to face this number on their own. But Johan did not listen to the warning and dashed quickly toward the danger, which shocked his companion. Joseph tried to stop him, warning that these were not ordinary wolves but man-eating monsters, but he reassured him and ordered him to save Dale while he took charge of distracting the pack. The companion was stunned by this behavior, unable to believe that a noble would sacrifice himself as bait to save a girl from the common people, but the truth was quite different, as he was blaming himself for not learning to hunt faster, having discovered that this place was nothing but a gold mine. Johan began counting the wolves, whose number exceeded 10, and instead of fear, He was calculating the massive profits he would reap from selling their fur. He prepared for the confrontation with enthusiasm, calling out to his moneymakers, causing Joseph to look at him in amazement, not understanding what was going on. The young man moved with incredible agility, but he held the sword in a strange way. The wolves rushed toward him quickly like a pack. He was surprised by the speed of the wolf's movement and used his sword to block its attack. The wolf used its powerful bite and broke the sword with total ease, causing Johan shock. While he was distracted, another wolf approached and directed a fatal bite toward his neck, and Joseph screamed his master's name, unable to believe what happened. Meanwhile, within the borders of HIIT's territory in the village of Baltradan, the HIIT's family inspection procession was moving among the miserable villagers who bowed in fear. Madame HIIT's expressed her severe disgust at the foul smell while covering her nose. She was followed by the eldest son, Philip HIIT's, mounting his steed, led by the territory's ruler, Gessen HIIT's, who cursed this miserable countryside and its usual foul smell. Philip approached his father apologetically, informing him that Johan was nowhere to be found, expressing his disapproval of his audacity to be absent from the inspection procession, then maliciously offered to send soldiers to search for that brat. The ruler ordered his eldest son in a harsh tone to forget about him and stop looking for that fool, adding with clear indifference as he swayed from drunkenness that his death somewhere, like his miserable mother, meant nothing to him. As the procession was about to enter the village, a large pile of hay stacked at the entrance stopped the ruler, so he asked with disapproval about the reason for its existence. The villagers rushed to apologize and explain that they placed the hay to cover the traces of Johan's training, which looked ugly to the sight, provoking the mockery of the ruler who scoffed at the idea of a pathetic insect like him training. But that mockery vanished suddenly and was replaced by shock that tied the ruler's tongue when he saw behind the hay pile a deep indentation in the trees resulting from crushing punches, making him wonder in amazement at what he was seeing. Meanwhile, inside the forest, the scene returns to Johan, where he managed to block the wolf's bite with his hand before it hit his neck, and the wolf was surprised that it could not penetrate his skin, just as he managed to break its sword. He realized that fighting with a sword did not suit his style, so he threw his weapon and knocked one of the wolves aside. Deciding to fight in his own way and facing the wolf pack, which he named Moneymakers, with his bare fists, Johan fully believed in the principle of survival of the fittest, and that money was his only way to avoid being prey. To acquire this money, he needed one thing: overwhelming power, enabling him to surpass human limits. Joseph is shocked when he sees him eliminate a wolf with a single punch, pouncing on them fiercely and eliminating them one by one. He crushed the last wolf with a resounding blow that turned it into a lifeless corpse, in a scene that made his companion tremble in disbelief at such mighty power, while he turned coldly asking about the monetary value of this bounty. This power didn't come from nowhere. Johan had realized since childhood that life in this world was not easy, having suffered from the bullying of his brothers who outranked him in the family hierarchy and who did not hesitate to beat him and call him the illegitimate son who has no mother. With the continued threats and beatings, he understood the cruelty of this world, and became certain that even if he were beaten to death, no one would care about him, and that the only person he could rely on was himself. He wondered what he needed to survive in a world of the Middle Ages, and luckily he possessed an advantage over the people of this era: his modern knowledge acquired in his previous life as a student, where his mind was teeming with information unimaginable to the inhabitants of this world. He decided to utilize sports science and high-intensity training to build his physique, and despite the astonishment of those around him at his consumption of foods they considered leftovers like oats and cabbage, he saw them as superfoods ideal for building a balanced diet that gives him the strength he sought. He set a strict training regimen based on modern sports science combined with practical close-quarters combat arts, and thus the results of his continuous training accumulated. After several years of persisting with the same training regimen, his body showed overwhelming power that increased with every training session, as he began to feel refreshed and energetic instead of exhaustion. Over time, the question remained hanging whether this power was a divine blessing or just a new test. Returning to the battlefield, Johan stood wiping his sweat, saying these were the last of the wolves. Meanwhile, the companion Joseph checked on the child Dale and confirmed her safety, so she threw herself crying into his lap calling for Uncle Joseph. The companion scolded his master severely, describing him as reckless for not realizing the danger of what he had done, but he soon expressed his deep emotion at a noble standing before a wild beast without hesitation to save a common girl, offering his deep thanks on behalf of the villagers. While Joseph was speaking seriously, Johan was in his own world calculating his profits, wondering which wolves would sell for the highest price, causing his companion to ask him in amazement what he was saying, to which he replied briefly that it was nothing. He turned to Dale and asked about her condition, and she confirmed gratefully that she was fine thanks to him. Suddenly, the girl shuddered in terror, as a terrifying red aura appeared behind them, accompanied by immense pressure, causing everyone to turn toward the source. A giant wolf appeared with glowing red eyes and a huge body, striking panic into Joseph's heart, who screamed that it was a real monster requiring an entire army to face, demanding they flee immediately. But Johan realized then that this world contained real monsters and was not just a world of the Middle Ages, so he smiled confidently and asked the beast if he was the pack leader. Then he apologized sarcastically for killing the monster's followers, noting that wolf fur sells for a high price. He felt the monster viewed him as prey as it growled, preparing to pounce. The monster pounced fiercely towards him, but this changed nothing in the equation for him, as he avoided the monster's bite skillfully, asserting that whatever it was, its skin would sell for a much higher price than the rest. He directed a powerful blow toward the monster's eye, causing it to stagger slightly from the force of the blow, but it steadied itself quickly and looked at him angrily. However, Johan shouted in anger because he scratched the skin by mistake, which meant a decrease in its price on the market. The monster growled in pain and humiliation, then let out a powerful howl. The young man used his hands to plug his ears. Suddenly, he felt a strange sensation sweep over him and his features changed, as a vision of a violent clash of swords amidst burning flames flashed before him. And when someone's head is cut off in the dream, he wakes up suddenly, screaming in shock. He sat on the ground panting heavily, filled with confusion and astonishment at what had just happened, wondering about the fate of that terrifying monster. Realizing moments after looking around that the monster had disappeared completely from the place, he checked on his companion and the child, finding them in a deep sleep, and breathed a sigh of relief that everyone was safe. He carried his companion and the child on his back, deciding to return quickly before more monsters appeared, admitting to himself that he was completely ignorant of the nature of what happened. As he left the place, he couldn't hide his regret looking at the wolf corpses he left behind, wishing he could take those precious furs with him. But he surrendered to reality, realizing his helplessness in this situation, telling himself he must borrow a cart next time. Upon approaching the village, he noticed the lights were still on, wondering if the villagers were still out searching for the missing child. Here his imagination began to work, thinking that although he saved the child without prior planning, this might be an opportunity to earn extra points with his father, imagining a dreamy scenario where his father expresses admiration for his defeat of the wolf pack and appoints him as his successor. But he quickly mocked himself, banishing that impossible idea, settling for the hope of being appointed to the guard at least, which would ensure he wouldn't worry about food in the future. His train of thought was interrupted suddenly by the bright light of a torch and the sound of suspicious movement, finding himself shocked in front of a group of armed knights, led by Philip, who screamed at him in overwhelming anger, calling him by his full name, and condemning his disappearance and audacity to be absent on the important inspection day. The news fell on him like a thunderbolt, as he suddenly remembered that today was the inspection date, realizing he was in a real predicament, especially when his father described him as an insolent child. He put the companion down and knelt on his knees, stammering while speaking to his father, trying to justify his absence by saying he had unavoidable circumstances. But the father cut him off sharply, ordering him to silence, and raised his massive axe, threatening to smash his insolent head for daring to ignore him. In those moments, Johan was cursing his luck internally, upset at having to hear these insulting words after miraculously escaping death, regretting the loss of the wolf furs, and describing his difficult life. But amidst this despair, an idea flashed in his mind, and he decided he could turn this disaster into an opportunity to his advantage. He decided to resort to absolute flattery, screaming to his father that he didn't miss the inspection on purpose, but was late because he was busy saving people in the forest. Meanwhile, one of the men in the procession recognized his daughter Dale lying on the ground, so he screamed her name, praising God for her safety after a long search, and embraced her with tears streaming from his eyes, expressing his overwhelming happiness at her survival. He seized the opportunity immediately, pointing skillfully to the scene and addressing everyone in a loud voice, explaining that Dale was trapped by a pack of man-eating wolves in the forest, and that he fought to save the child and managed to defeat the wolves. Murmurs of amazement rose among the villagers, while he completed his dramatic speech asserting that although he was unable to attend the inspection, he believes he has done his duty as a son of a noble knight family. He bowed with deep respect, asking his father for forgiveness this time only, promising him to continue doing his utmost to ensure the safety of the territory, then added in a faint voice and a greedy tone, wishing his father would grant him the position of guard captain as well, which provoked the ire of Philip, who muttered angrily. Johan congratulated himself internally on this perfect public relations display, assuring himself that if he were the interviewer, he would hire himself immediately. The father exploded in laughter, asking if this really happened. "Oh dear future guard captain, but he soon turned serious and suspicious, asking about the location of the corpses of those alleged wolves, asserting he didn't expect him to believe without proof. Johan panicked internally, screaming in defense of his honesty, asserting he even faced the great black wolf, but his father interrupted him with a resounding scream filled with anger, ordering him to complete silence. The father flew into a rage, accusing his son of lying, threatening to tear his mouth if he didn't shut up. But Johan didn't back down. Rather, he challenged his father coldly, asking him if he wanted a duel, showing his full readiness to prove his skills. Despite his hatred for his father, he was hesitant to fight him, but the situation left him no choice but confrontation. The father accepted the challenge with a fierce smile, announcing his desire to see the extent of his son's true skill. The father ordered his son to raise his sword, asserting the duel would be with weapons only, which provoked his anger, cursing his father in secret, recalling that no one had taught him how to use a weapon at all. When the order rang out to draw the sword, he was confused looking at his broken sword, realizing the unequal odds. His father cursed him, despising him, and ordered the eldest son to lend his sword to his brother, so Philip agreed nervously. While handing over the sword, Philip whispered to him, advising him to ask for forgiveness now before it was too late as the only way for survival. But he rejected the advice thinking he hadn't erred, asserting that a real man doesn't run away. He asked his brother to step aside and grabbed the sword, hoping to learn something from this duel. The father scoffed, considering this better, while Johan told himself that showing his skills was the only way to wrest his father's acknowledgement of him, and resolved to prove his worth. Suddenly the father felt something strange, as a savage red aura appeared before him surrounding his son. The father pounced quickly with immense force attacking, but Johan's sword was broken easily from the force of the collision, and he received the sword fragments with great difficulty, causing him to bleed and suffer, while his father was unharmed due to wearing armor. The father continued his attack, calling his son a parasite, screaming angrily how he dared to insult him. The villagers realized with horror that the lord was completely serious in his fight, and intended to kill his son truly. During his attack, the father revealed the reason for not teaching the sword to Johan, reasoning that he would remain a useless piece of trash either way, confirming with violent blows that he would never surpass him no matter how he tried. The father screamed insanely, declaring the territory belonged to him alone, and no one, not even the emperor, had the right to take it from him. Johan wondered in amazement if his father had lost his mind due to alcohol. While profuse bleeding hindered his vision, Philip screamed his brother's name in warning, and the father brought down a crushing blow. The son tried to block the attack, but the force of the blow was overwhelming and penetrated his defense, forcing him to admit defeat to himself in that moment. He fell to his knees exhausted, while his father stood over him coldly, ordering him to know his worth and place well, then directed a terrifying threat at him that if he saw him again, he would smash his head without mercy. The father left the place, leaving his son shattered, and this silence was only broken by the voice of one of the villagers calling him Master Johan. Later, the priest Valberg appeared, fuming with anger at Lord Gessen's behavior, describing it as unjust. And despite Johan's warning that someone might hear them, Valberg didn't care, citing his immunity as an envoy from the Vatican. The priest continued his complaining while treating his wounds, asserting that a knight must possess honor, and strongly condemning the father's treatment of his son with such cruelty. Johan tried to calm the situation with a tired smile, saying he was fine and the most important thing was staying alive. But the priest pointed out the absurdity of the situation where the father wore full armor to duel his unarmed son, to which he replied with a sarcastic laugh that his father might have lost his mind from excessive drinking. Johan sat facing his bitter reality, realizing his total helplessness for not having learned sword arts before. The priest tried to console him, explaining that the loss was logical given the Lord's combat experience and the family techniques he inherited. To illustrate the difference in power, the priest mentioned that Sir Brits in the neighboring fiefdom managed to kill 300 infantry soldiers alone, which struck the young man with amazement at the power of knights. He realized then the importance of combat techniques, admitting he became arrogant after defeating the wolf and thought he could defeat his drunk father. Suddenly the priest asked seriously if he had truly seen a black wolf in the forest. Johan confirmed it, noting that Joseph and Dale had seen it too. Surprised by the priest's reaction, panic appeared on the priest's face as he muttered religious prayers, increasing his confusion. The priest opened an old book to explain that black wolves have been considered taboo since ancient times, where priests call them the harbinger of death. The priest explained that according to stories dating back centuries, the appearance of black wolves brings death and blood. Although Johan claimed not to believe in superstitions, he wondered if the wolf was an omen for his duel with his father, which the priest agreed was a probability. But the priest quickly changed his tone to reassure him, asserting with a smile that those were just old stories with no need to worry. He added that the Lord might help him because he is a kind person who prefers others over himself, which the young man denied in secret, admitting his only motive was money. Meanwhile, near HIIT's territory, specifically in the Brits barony, a horrific massacre was taking place where cries for help and pleading rose. The attackers showed no mercy to anyone. Bodies and blood were scattered everywhere, and desolate silence prevailed over the victims' bodies. The attackers wondered sarcastically why the victims tried to flee even though their fate was death anyway. The attackers commented coldly on the cruelty of the scene, where everyone in the fiefdom was killed and bodies burned to obliterate traces. But they didn't care, considering they were just doing their job, to get gold, while flames devoured the fiefdom's buildings behind them. Finally, one mercenary stepped forward to inform his leader Sir Karamov that they finished cleaning, presenting him with the Brits family seal ring as proof of the family's extermination. Karamov grabbed the Brits family seal ring in his hand and crushed it with force, expressing his severe disappointment because Baron Brits only withstood 2 attacks from him, despite the high expectations he built on rumors claiming he killed 300 soldiers alone, describing him as not even deserving to be a doll for amusement. Karamov boasted of his identity as a sword of the Holy Empire, an envoy of the Emperor, and collector of seals, issuing a decree to punish all corrupt nobles according to the Emperor's will. Karamov promised his soldiers and the Emperor's followers gold and infinite honor, ordering them to set out to kill, steal, and burn everything without mercy, clearly defining their next destination towards HIIT's territory. Meanwhile, Johan was dreaming of a scene where 2 knights were fighting each other, and one of them in the dream was parrying the other's attacks with total ease. Then the knight with golden armor responds with an attack cutting off the other knight's head. Then he sees in his dream the knight's severed head, and realizes in silent shock that the head he sees is his own head. Johan woke up in his room terrified and sweating, wondering if what he saw was just a dream. The same nightmare had been haunting him for days since seeing the Black Wolf. He remembered the priest's talk explaining that the Black Wolf has been known since ancient times as a bad omen, where priests consider its very existence a bad sign bringing blood and death. He placed his hand on his face, anxiously recalling the priest's description of the wolf as the mark of death. He tried to banish these thoughts with a nervous laugh, convincing himself they were just superstitions and myths as the priest said, assuring himself he did nothing bad to the wolf. But he froze suddenly when he remembered throwing a very large rock at it. He decided to shake these obsessions from his head and go training instead of useless thinking. While Johan was punching a tree trunk in the forest at sunset, a familiar voice interrupted, calling him useless child. His 2 brothers, 2nd and 3rd in rank, appeared mocking him, reminding him of their father's warning not to draw attention if he wanted to stay alive. They continued mocking his audacity to act tough despite being beaten previously, describing him as a dog that barks but doesn't bite, belittling his training of chopping wood. The brothers mocked the idea that a lowlife like him had real power, considering breaking firewood just a cheap trick. When they remembered what he said about joining the guard, they burst out laughing, asserting their father would never appoint trash like him. While he was directing a light punch at the tree, one of them continued threatening that their father would use him only to smash his skull and feed him to pigs. But suddenly, sounds of violent crashing rang out and splinters flew as his punch caused massive destruction to the tree trunk, which struck the brothers with shock and terror, causing their eyes to bulge from their sockets. He turned to them with a terrifying smile and veins popping on his muscular body, asking them to come closer and repeat what they just said. The brothers retreated in extreme fear and fled, screaming they would tell their father everything. He looked after them in despair, describing them as pathetic fools for living without the slightest thought or worry about how to secure their future and livelihood. He made up his mind, deciding to ignore others and return to focusing on his training only. But he suddenly heard another person's voice acknowledging that what his brother said was the exact truth. His brother Philip appeared, confirming clearly that their father intended to appoint him to no position, something Johan expected beforehand, considering not killing him was the most he could hope for. When Philip asked him about his disappointment, he replied realistically that he would find another way to earn a living. Philip surprised him by saying the father actually fears him, explaining that his great strength represents a threat to him. The father wants obedient children, while he insists on living according to his own principles, making the father believe his son will wrest sovereignty from him one day by force as he did with their grandfather, which Johan considered mere nonsense. Philip ordered a servant to bring something, revealing a simple coat and a long sword of unknown origin, in addition to a spare breastplate, indicating he knew his brother's old desire to possess this equipment. Philip confirmed he differs from his father and is not a fool to discard a competent person, making a promise that he would appoint him guard captain once he inherits the rule. Philip advised his brother to continue training and not cause trouble until then, so he replied, grumbling that he is never the one starting trouble. Philip left the place, raising his finger in a sign that he objects to his words, leaving Johan alone contemplating the armor, realizing with shock it was the same armor he saw in his nightmares. He wondered in terror if wearing it would lead him to the same death he saw in the dream, but he felt a strange intuition that he was capable of overcoming this fate despite lacking evidence, and decided he would need this equipment to win whatever the price. The scene shifted to the tavern, where some were denying Johan's story, but one insisted on its validity. claiming epically that he killed 50 wolves and left the spoils out of pride, fighting only to save Dale. Everyone agreed on his nobility, comparing him to his father Gessen, whom they described as a drunken pig, and even wished he had cut off his father's head in that duel. Robert's voice interrupted, offering to buy drinks for everyone, and when a masked person asked him for the reason, he justified it as a celebration of Johan saving his daughter. One of the sitters was surprised and asked the stranger about his identity since he was a new face in the region, to which the stranger replied with a scary, sarcastic laugh, commenting on their audacity to insult their ruler openly in front of a stranger. The stranger sat in the tavern wondering in amazement at the audacity of the young man and the villagers who show no fear. The stranger turned with a sly smile toward one of the men, expressing his keen interest in the story he just told, and asked him enthusiastically to tell him more about Johan HIIT, which raised the man's suspicion and fear. Meanwhile, Johan walked alone at night, humming happily, dreaming of his bright future as guard captain once his brother Philip took power. He felt his golden path had finally begun, and started reconsidering his evaluation of his brother, considering him someone reliable. Suddenly he spotted someone lying on the ground, thought he was drunk, and decided out of his responsibility as future guard captain not to ignore him. He approached the man with a friendly smile, warning him against sleeping in the open for fear of the cold, and offered help to take him home, but the man didn't answer. Suddenly he noticed something cold shining, placed against his neck, and suddenly a sense of danger overtook him, and he wondered in shock what was happening. In a fleeting moment the man attacked with a dagger, but Johan couldn't see the attack, wondering in panic about the attacker's identity and if he was a hitman sent by his father. He ruled out the idea that his father was behind the attack because he would come to kill him himself, then wondered in terror if his stepmother was the culprit, also ruling out his brother's involvement. He realized he couldn't guess who sent him, so he screamed, asking the attacker what he wanted. He thought it was about money, so he offered the attacker everything he owned in exchange for his release, even though he didn't own a single penny in reality. The attacker replied coldly that he had enough money, increasing his confusion and terror regarding the real motive. The attacker stopped suddenly, addressing him by his full name and declaring he would ask him a question. The attacker threatened to slaughter him immediately if he didn't like the answer. Johan stood stunned by the strangeness of the situation, wondering to himself about the madness of this person threatening his life then asking a question. He tried to compose himself, summoning his past experience in job interviews, deciding to answer perfectly to save his life. The attacker announced the start of the interview with a scary smile, and the young man prepared for the confrontation. The attacker surprised Johan with a strange comment, pointing to his strong physique that didn't resemble his pig father, asking suspiciously if he was truly Gessen's son. He froze from shock and confusion, unable to believe this was the question determining his fate. He cursed his luck, thinking of the appropriate answer, then stammered, saying that sometimes a lion might be born from a pig's lineage. A heavy silence prevailed where the attacker showed no reaction, making him think he answered wrong and would die. Suddenly the attacker exploded in loud hysterical laughter, declaring his intense admiration for the answer, but he refused Johan's request to release him. With a demonic look, the attacker announced to him saying he was now his property. He stood dumbfounded, not understanding the meaning of his words. It turned out this man was Kigal, the Empire's greatest assassin and poison master of the Nessus Guild. He honed his sword skills through countless assassinations, and because his movements resembled a snake, he was later known as the Poison Viper. Kigal suffered from a difficult problem, having failed to find a successor worthy of inheriting his unique swordsmanship skills. Despite his exhaustive search everywhere, even inside the Assassin Guild itself, he found only worthless insects lacking qualifications to succeed him. He remembered moments watching trainees fall before him, where few showed potential, but they strongly refused to learn assassin skills, preferring honorable death over staining their reputation. Kigal had killed more than 30 heirs of noble knight families who chose death in the name of honor, rather than accepting his training. Due to his running out of patience and feeling time was tight in his search for a successor, he decided to visit the Empire's witch, asking for help. The witch welcomed the Poison Viper, who grants peaceful death to all, and revealed to him that the student he seeks resides in HIIT's castle, a small forgotten rural fiefdom, and is one of the sons of its drunken, lecherous ruler. Kigal mocked the prophecy, describing HIIT's castle as a dirty, backward place, underestimating the idea of his successor being there, noting that 1 gold coin is enough to buy half that land. But the witch laughed confidently and offered him his money back if her prophecy lied. Despite his doubt and worry about the witch stealing the coin, he decided to believe her as a last resort. Kigal wanted to believe the witch because he wasted long years searching and had no time left. However, when he stepped on HIIT's fiefdom land, doubt possessed him strongly again, wondering if the person worthy of succeeding him truly existed in this miserable place, and decided within himself to kill the boy immediately if he didn't like him. Returning to the present moment, Kigal introduced himself to Johan as the master of the Nessus Guild, declaring strictly he had no more time to waste, and that he would become his successor. Then he gave him 2 choices with no third: death at his hands now, or learning his skills in swordsmanship. Johan stood amazed, not comprehending the situation, and asked him stammering about the amount he had to pay to learn these skills. Kigal got angry, explaining he wouldn't accept money, increasing his astonishment as he didn't believe a guild master of this skill would teach him for free. He rejoiced greatly considering this hitting the jackpot, and asked Kigal eagerly why he took so long, calling him master, expressing that he waited for someone like him all his life. Kigal warned his student that his skills were assassin skills, and learning them would brand him with shame, and make him a stain in the history of any knight family, exposing him to scorn all his life. But Johan interrupted him with a desperate scream, asserting he didn't care about honor or shame at all, begging him to teach him. Kigal agreed, surprised by this new type of children. Johan seized the opportunity immediately and asked his new master if he would give him an allowance, reminding him of his wealth and his desperate need for money at such an age. Kigal looked at him in amazement, realizing this boy was something else entirely. At HIIT's castle, Lord Gessen announced the end of inspection and his intention to go out for a while, bidding farewell to his wife. The eldest son and his stepmother confirmed they would take care of the castle in his absence, but once he left, they exchanged meaningful glances. The wife muttered with malice that the castle would be hers no matter how Philip resisted, while he scoffed in secret, assuring her the next ruler would be none other than Philip VIII. The lord screamed angrily at his eldest son and wife, expressing he was fed up with their constant bickering all day, giving them permission to do whatever they pleased, then set out. Philip asked his father how to act regarding Johan, who hadn't returned yet, but the father screamed loudly, calling his son by his name, scaring him. The father replied with indifference and cruelty, considering the death of that weakling meant nothing to him, ordering them not to waste his time talking about him. Philip apologized to his father, claiming he understood, but once the father left, his features changed completely, and he began wondering with worry and confusion about his brother's whereabouts and what he was doing now. In the forest near the castle, Kigal decided to test Johan's skills. The young man asked to borrow a sword, explaining shyly that he breaks swords a lot, so the master agreed. Kigal was surprised by his talk about breaking swords, describing him as a reckless child he didn't like anything about. When Johan took a fighting stance, Kigal wondered if this boy was really a son of a knight family, deciding to kill him immediately due to his strange stance. The student asked if he was obligated to use sword skills or could fight freely, so Kigal permitted him to fight as he pleased. Johan smiled slyly when he was permitted to use his fists or rocks or anything, because that wouldn't change the result. He attacked suddenly, and used his fist to break his sword easily, from the force of impact with Kigal's sword, and at that moment the master realized the error of his doubts, and while looking at him in shock, finally admitted the boy's immense strength. Kigal was surprised by the air pressure resulting from Johan's punch, realizing that if that punch hit him, his bones and muscles would be shattered, likening the boy's strength to a lion's, not a human's. But he decided to fight seriously, using a snake-like fighting technique, and Johan wondered in amazement at the master's strange and unexpected movements. He tried to block the attack, but the attack changed its path like a snake, hitting him in the face, and he fell to the ground screaming in pain. Kigal said he managed to hit him with the flat side of the sword, but was stunned because the boy didn't lose consciousness despite the force of the blow, describing it as ridiculous. Kigal praised his student, asserting that if he were born 1,000 years ago he would be a legendary hero. Johan thanked him, but the master added warning of a fatal weakness he had. He declared strictly he would inevitably die if he continued this way, sparking his shock and confusion as he didn't understand the meaning. Kigal warned his student strictly that his inability to control his excessive strength would be the direct cause of his demise, but he denounced this talk, rejecting the idea of being stupid enough to cause his own death, disbelieving this possibility. The master asked him to attack again if he was confident, then offered him a tempting deal to give him gold if he could break the master's sword instead of his own. Upon hearing the word gold, Johan's features changed completely and his eyes shone with greed. His hesitation turned into unparalleled enthusiasm, and he promised his master to fulfill the condition immediately. He dashed at tremendous speed toward the master to attack, and the sound of strong sword clash rang in the place, but the result was disappointing, as his sword shattered again and its fragments flew into his face, making him scream in pain. He remembered bitterly that this situation matched exactly what happened to him during his father's duel. Kigal explained to his student that the problem wasn't the sword, but his uncontrolled strength, emphasizing the necessity of learning to control it or else death would be his fate. Kigal threw a piece of the broken sword blade at him, explaining that breaking things is easy for swordmasters, but the difficulty lies in control. Johan finally understood he needed to learn to curb his strength to avoid death, and to achieve his dream of becoming HIIT's guard captain. The master told him that if he learned to curb his strength, he could do amazing things. In the blink of an eye, Kigal directed a swift blow at Johan. He was stunned when he saw his metal armor slit in half with a single clean blow. What increased his amazement was that the master used only the sword scabbard, not the blade, explaining that power control enables him to cut anything even without a sharp blade. Kigal smiled, saying he couldn't imagine the extent of power his student would reach when mastering this control. The master announced the end of talk and the start of serious training. When Johan asked anxiously if he would die, Kigal confirmed training would be grueling and might actually lead to death, asking if he was ready. He answered with great enthusiasm in the affirmative. The scene shifted to the quiet castle village, where Johan appeared with a swollen face and clear signs of beating from harsh training. He was talking to himself about the difficulty of controlling his strength, noting he finally learned not to break his sword, but yearned to learn real swordsmanship. Suddenly a commotion caught his attention, and he saw a group of strangers he thought were elves because of their appearance. He screamed at the group leader, asking why they were standing there. The group leader ordered him to leave immediately because the area was restricted. Johan replied sharply, resenting a stranger dictating orders to him. The leader laughed arrogantly, identifying himself as belonging to the Emperor's direct mercenaries. He revealed they were the famous Aquitaine Wolves squad. Instead of fear, Johan screamed in amazement and joy, asking about mercenary salaries because he wanted a job like them. One guard asked sarcastically if he really wanted to become a mercenary like them, explaining mockingly that what they earn in one mission compares not to a guard captain's salary. He revealed they get 2 gold coins per mission, which struck him with extreme amazement. The guard warned Johan that his strong physique made him a bigger target, emphasizing that skill is most important in their work, which he agreed with. While he was drowning in his dreams, thinking of changing his career path to get gold he hadn't seen in his life, he wondered seriously if working as a mercenary was better than the guard captain position. Meanwhile, Karamov and his group arrived inside the castle. But suddenly something strange happened. Johan's hand moved involuntarily, attempting to draw his sword, causing him extreme shock and confusion. The fairy accompanying Karamov noticed his movement, screaming angrily, considering his behavior the height of insolence, threatening to cut off his head immediately for daring to try drawing his sword in her master's face. Karamov intervened to calm the fairy, Jin, and asked him calmly about his identity. Johan stammered, sweating, identifying himself as a member of the HIIT's family. Then, Karamov revealed his identity as an Imperial Guard Knight. Johan was surprised again when he found his hand on his sword hilt unconsciously. A terrifying feeling overtook him he hadn't experienced before, even when facing the Black Wolf or his father. He described this feeling as the killing intent emanating from Karamov being suffocating, like prey standing helpless before an invincible predator. He ordered him to move aside because he was blocking the way. He felt his heart beating wildly from fear and tension. One soldier mocked his obvious fear, and another soldier described him as a coward. Then he warned him in a sarcastic tone to be careful next time, doubting there would be a next time for him. Jin asked her master if it was right to leave him alive, but Karamov replied he didn't want to cause a scene on such a good day. He entered the castle and muttered something mysterious, that their time to move hadn't started yet. Johan wondered in confusion why an Imperial Knight was in such a remote place. Suddenly Philip appeared, rushing to receive the grand guest. He welcomed Karamov, introducing himself as the next lord of the HIIT's family, and asked him eagerly about the reason for his visit. The stepmother expressed her intense admiration for Karamov, describing him as incredibly handsome, and presented her son John as the true heir to the lord, ignoring Philip completely. She continued flirting with Karamov, expressing regret over her early marriage, and offered him entry to the inner castle. Karamov didn't reply to her, but she tried to catch his attention again, yet he ignored her completely. Instead, he asked sharply and seriously about Gessen's whereabouts. Philip objected to addressing his father without titles, considering it inappropriate regardless of status. But the stepmother interrupted him again, defending Karamov as the Empire's greatest knight entitled to address anyone as he pleased, and announced as lady of the house she would handle his reception, hinting at Philip not to object. Philip looked with malice at his stepmother, describing her as cunning for trying to seize the opportunity to appoint her son John heir to the castle. But Karamov interrupted them with a resounding scream, ordering them to silence. He chased everyone away, rudely ordering them to bring him alcohol instead of their chatter. Then he announced coldly he would wait inside the castle until Gessen's arrival. In the dark forest, Johan was swinging his sword with immense force, creating great air pressure, and during fighting he remembered the dangerous aura he felt when he met Karamov. Kigal watched him silently for a moment, before screaming at him, suddenly calling him a fool for lack of focus, throwing daggers at him. He blocked the daggers with great difficulty while groaning, having suffered a slight cut on his neck and appearing extremely tense. Kigal scolded his student, saying if the dagger was poisoned he would be dead, asking the reason for his distraction. Johan admitted something worried him about the knights claiming to be the Emperor's personal guard. He saw it illogical for them to close gates and control entry and exit in HIIT's fiefdom this way. Kigal replied coldly, asking what he could do about it, whether it was suspicious or not. Kigal explained that Karamov is the Emperor's direct knight, the strongest warrior on the continent, and his armor itself is legendary. Johan asked curiously if Karamov was stronger than his master. Kigal admitted seriously that if forced to face him, he would turn his back and flee without hesitation. Kigal hit his student on the head to silence him, asserting fight results are unknown until fought. Then he scolded him harshly, describing him as a half-smart child worrying about others while unable to even control his own strength or know basic swordsmanship. Johan regained focus and held the sword seriously, announcing readiness to try. The master sighed and signaled him to attack. Johan dashed, attacking powerfully, and the master's voice rang out asking him to repeat. The attacks continued, with Kigal screaming again, every time. He began wondering in confusion why his attacks didn't succeed. He noticed the master used only the sword scabbard, not the blade, yet he couldn't cut it. Kigal explained the secret lies in power flow. He advised his student not to wave the sword blindly, but to transfer power flow and focus it at the sword tip. As Johan waved his sword, he slowly began to grasp the meaning of power control. Kigal noticed the change immediately, as the muffled sound of his student's sword turned sharp. Johan executed a powerful blow different from previous ones. At that moment, he was certain if he combined everything he learned with the right amount of power, he would succeed. Kigal suddenly felt intense fear, describing the situation as dangerous. In a fleeting moment, he found his sword cut without realizing what happened. Johan stood amazed, staring at his master's cut sword in disbelief, then screamed with overwhelming joy, declaring his success in the task and full grasp of the required feeling, considering it very easy. But Kigal downplayed this achievement, considering it just a lucky strike. Johan was surprised by his master's reaction, and when he called him, he replied affirmatively with innocence. Kigal announced quite seriously he wouldn't go easy this time, challenging him to attack again. Johan bared his fangs and showed a terrifying snake-like attack, striking terror into the master. He managed to knock Kigal to the ground. He kept jumping for joy because he succeeded in his attack again. Kigal wondering in confusion what this boy was, having taught him only power control. Yet he managed to use the secret sword technique Snake Tongue quite freely. The master was stunned by his student's ability to grasp a technique he saw in a quick glimpse at their first meeting, and even more so, executing it with skill surpassing the master himself. The old assassin's experience told its owner a terrifying truth, that unless a miracle happened, Johan had already become an opponent he couldn't defeat. Kigal muttered in amazement, describing him as a ridiculous child, while he jumped for joy having learned the technique and secured his meal ticket. Suddenly, Kigal announced his teaching was over and he would leave at sunrise. Johan was surprised and asked disapprovingly, noting he only learned sword basics, but the master assured him he already possessed everything he needed. Kigal admitted grudgingly he had become stronger than him in less than a week. Kigal expressed satisfaction as long as his sword skills wouldn't perish and would continue through him, advising him to live his life as he pleased. Then he praised him, saying he worked hard throughout training. Johan thanked him sincerely, asking if his departure was due to being an assassin. Kigal denied that, explaining it was his nature not to stay long in one place. Johan seized the opportunity to ask his master about ominous signs and the black wolf. He told him about his dream seeing his head cut off after seeing the wolf, and how he thought Kigal was the bad omen when attempting to kill him first. Kigal replied if he actually killed him, he would be the omen, explaining bad luck doesn't come in a fixed specific form. Before leaving, Kigal offered final advice to his student. He advised finding a weapon suiting his immense power first, noting his need for Dano steel at least to withstand his strength, sparking his question about this steel. Kigal explained Dano steel is magic-infused metal found only as legendary relics. He added its crafting method is lost and can only be extracted from ancient ruins, making weapons made from it extremely rare with only a few existing worldwide. Johan scoffed at the idea of being unable to afford a Dano steel weapon even if saving all his life, resenting his master recommending a weapon unpurchasable by money anyway. But Kigal explained sharply, he didn't mean buying the weapon, but finding a weapon suiting his current situation. He doubted his master's intentions, accusing him of hiding his true motives, being an assassin, provoking Kigal's anger, who scolded him for linking everything to his profession. Then he pointed to the unusual weapon color for Danos steel. Kigal warned his student, strictly saying, if he saw someone wearing Danos armor, even from a distance, just to flee, without looking back. He added another vital tip, if you don't know your limits, you won't live long, which he promised to keep in mind. After Kigal finished his advice, Johan asked him if he would leave now. The master asked him to carve his next words into his bones. He advised not fighting opponents he couldn't defeat, and fleeing if the situation was dangerous. But if forced to fight, he must use any necessary means and kill without hesitation. Kigal assured him if he followed this rule, he likely wouldn't die. He He looked at him seriously and asked him not to die. Johan remembered his master's words after leaving, to flee if the situation was dangerous, and kill if he couldn't avoid fighting, and always try to survive. He promised him to remember those words. At HIIT's castle, Madame HIIT asked Karamov if the alcohol suited his taste. Karamov threw the cup with disgust, saying it tasted like rotten piss, and ordered it taken away. The stepmother tried to salvage the situation coquettishly, considering breaking the cup a costly act, and asked if he didn't like it. The wife lamented, saying the better alcohol was in Lord Gessen's bedroom. She boldly suggested Karamov, tired from his journey, move to a comfortable bedroom instead of staying in the hall. She assured him the Lord's room was very comfortable and wouldn't disappoint him. She approached him, whispering seductively that they were alone and could spend a wonderful time together, asking if he agreed. But Karamov replied with deadly coldness, ordering her to get out of his face. The wife tried maintaining her composure despite the insult, reminding him of tight time, and asked permission to start receiving him, noting the Lord would return late. Suddenly, Karamov's eye flashed with a terrifying red glint. He muttered boredly that he was tired of this situation. Then he announced his decision to start enjoying himself. Karamov clamped down on Madame HIIT's neck, describing the massacre as that entertainment known as murder. Philip watched the scene in shock, trying not to make any sound, so Karamov wouldn't find him. Outside, Johan reached the village outskirts to be surprised by a horrifying scene. He saw flames devouring the entire village, and froze in shock, wondering in amazement why the village was burning. At the same time, Jessen, seeing the same sight, wonders why smoke is coming from his estate. One of the men says he doesn't know, but they should return at once. They ride there as fast as they can, and Jess stops at the gates. The mercs say he finally shows himself after something fun has taken place. He's so slow and dull just as he looks. They call him a pig, telling him to move faster, as Kuramov isn't a very patient man. Jessen enters the gates only to be horrified by the sight of all of his servants and children murdered with horrified expressions on their faces. His heart starts to race and he asks what's going on. Kurama then walks forward, telling him that he's late. Jess asks what he's doing and grabs his axe, then yells it once more, pointing it at him. Kuramov says that he is guilty of the attempted assassination of the emperor and high treason. By his majesty's decree, his house shall be eradicated. Jessen tells him not to be absurd, as this is a purge and they're pinning false charges on him to execute him. He won't go along with it. Kuramov sheath his blade, telling his men to blow the horn, as it's time for him to retrieve the seal of the HIIT's family and purge everybody in this territory. Also, to erase this entire land from the map, as the mercs' eyes fill with bloodlust. They start charging towards the town. After setting it ablaze and killing everybody we can, we see Volberg on his knees, and one of the mercs call him vicious, asking if it's that hard for him to say where the pig's bastard son is hiding. If he doesn't want to open his mouth, he'll send him straight to his god who he adores so much. He then raises his blade, telling him to die, but Johan sneaks up behind him and cleaves him clean too. Duberg is surprised, asking Johan what he's doing here. Johan, though, is more worried about what's happening. Duberg says that he doesn't know either. The Imperial troops are killing villagers on sight. It's possible that Jessen has already been killed too. Johan is surprised, asking if his father is really dead. Volaberg says that's not all. They're burning the entire village to wipe everything out. Johan says that he needs to hurry back to the castle, and then he hears a little girl crying and recognizes it. He walks over towards one of the houses that's still ablaze and spots Dell crying. He says that he's glad she's safe and it's dangerous, so come over here. He then sees that her father has been executed and pinned to a pole. She starts crying, talking about her father. John's heart starts to drop, and he recalls how happy he was when he saved his daughter just a week ago, as well as all the memories he shared with the villagers. Also, he begins to feel hella mixed with emotions, but there's nothing he can do about it. He grits his teeth and tells Dell that it's dangerous, so she needs to go with Valberg. Volberg then yells, asking John where he's going, as he needs to flee. He starts screaming out for him. Johan makes his way to the gates and looks up to see his father's head on a pike. The sign says that Jessen has been executed for treason against the emperor, and anyone who retrieves his corpse without permission will be punished for the same crime. One of the mercs recognizes him as the bastard son, asking if he came back to die. John then slashes the pike with his father's head on it, causing it to fall onto the floor, and he tramples the flag. The mercs say that they need to kill him now. Johan glares at them and starts cutting them into pieces one after the other, single-handedly destroying their entire group. On the inside, he wonders why he's doing this and why he's going back to the castle. Volg was right, as he should be running away, because if he goes back, he'll die for no reason fighting Kuramov. He then hears Philip call out for him as he sees him wearing armor with 3 arrows in his chest. Philip says that he's glad he's alive, but asks why he came back, saying that he needs to run away because if he stays, he'll die. He then takes off his helmet, saying he wanted to give this to him for when he becomes the Lord one day. Johan looks down at it and starts to have conflicting emotions because his master told him that he needs to understand the difference in skill level as soon as it gets dangerous to run. His opponent is the Emperor's knight and that he should run without looking. When he looks down at the helmet that his brother gave him, he also recalls his master saying if he has to fight, then he must kill. John puts on the helmet saying that time is now. He stands up and confidently walks to the castle gates, pushing it open. The mercs look over at him confused, asking how he got inside when there were so many guards out there. Johan rears back his fist and yells, telling Karamov to get out here as he deletes one of these dudes' skull in a single punch. He slowly makes his way deeper into the castle until Karamov walks out with his sword that is still dripping with his family's blood. Karamov says that he didn't think the runaway son really survived. He recognizes the fact they met outside the castle before asking if his name was Johan. Johan tells him that he's not in the mood to exchange names and that he can just think of him as a pissed-off man. Karamov says he should have kept running because if he did, he could have lived. He supposes he doesn't care about his life at all, and if that's the case, then to come straight at him and get this over with. Johan yells, saying that he didn't need to tell him that to begin with, as that's what he was going to do. They start trading blows with one another, just like the dreams Johan was having, and they got to the exact moment where John readied the attack and swung down. Karamov blocked it. As Johan's sword gets cut by Karmaps, he goes to swing for his head, but Johan drops the sword and dodges backwards before grabbing another one and charges straight in. Karama smiles, saying that this is fun. He cuts another one of the swords in half, and this happens over and over and over again. As John is continuously grabbing swords off of the mercs that he already killed, he then dodges a big swing from Karamov while he's stuck from the dodge. Karamov comes in to finish it and swings down. Johan avoids this one, causing Karamov to slice into one of the pillars of the castle, and it begins crumbling. Karamov says this is interesting, and he's far more entertaining than Brits was from within the smoke of the rubble collapsing. One of the mercs get thrown at him. Karamov cuts straight through him, saying that this is truly enjoyable and he wants even more entertainment. Johan finally manages to grab another sword and comes in with a heavy-ass swing to which Karamov blocks using his arm. But the attack pierces through his armor but also takes a chunk out of his arm, though of course the blade gets broken. Karamov is genuinely surprised as he distances himself. It takes a moment for it to set in because he just cut through his Danis steel armor. Karamov begins trembling as John grabs another blade. Karamov says, "That's impossible, as humans are incapable of harming Danis," asking just who he is. John charges straight in once more and they continue trading blow for blow, while Karamov says that he's never heard of such strength before. But it seems like that's all he is because he's easily blocking all the attacks. And even though he's on the defensive, Johan can't get in a single meaningful hit. Karamov realizes that he's a brute with only strength and there's no finesse to his attacks. He thrusts forward, Johan blocks it. Of course, the sword breaks and he quickly grabs another off the floor and readies himself once more. Karamov says that it's just as he expected and he can't even properly block a simple thrust and he's swinging purely by instinct right now. There's no technique behind him, which makes him think that Jessen never taught him real swordsmanship. He can tell that he's dangerous, so he needs to finish this quickly because if he grows, he will become someone nobody can stop. And if he uses that stupid wide slash again, he'll break it, cleaving through the sword, cutting his head off with one swing. John then starts to do exactly as he thought, but it was just a fake as he does a quick change up. Karamov is completely caught off guard and goes to react. Johan uses Kagel's technique, changing his direction to Karamov's open side. The sword comes into contact with the armor. He manages to deal a very heavy blow in exchange for losing his sword. Karamov starts screaming in pain as his insides start to spill out. He sees John rearing back his fist as he comes and hitting him straight in the side where he just cut him. The Danny's armor begins to dent and we see a massive shockwave from the punch. That's not all, as it explodes out the backside, causing him to spit up a ton of blood. He stabs his sword into the ground while nothing but blood comes out of his mouth. His eyes begin to go a little hazy, and he recognizes it as Kagel's swordsmanship, meaning that Johan was hiding his true skill all along and that he completely let his guard down. Johan points a broken blade at his throat, while Karamov continues to bleed out from all the internal damage. There is a literal pool of blood underneath him, and he begins coughing his jaw and lowers his blade and raises his helmet. He drops it onto the floor, asking him why he did all of this. Karamov says that it was all for his Imperial Majesty, as the Holy Empire is now more unstable than ever. His Majesty has unsheathed the Imperial sword to correct the Empire. Before he finishes his next sentence, he starts coughing violently, holding onto his side while spitting up even more blood. He then starts to laugh, telling Johan he's moved. For decades, he's crossed battlefields and fought countless knights, but he's never encountered anybody as strong as him before, and that he needs him to go with the Empire with him, as His Majesty needs a strong talent like him right now. The Empire's endless gold will grant him glory, and he shall receive vast and fertile lands. He'll see to it as well that His Majesty will appoint him as an Imperial Knight. He becomes the Imperial Sword. He'll get anything he wishes. John thinks about endless gold, but says that it's strange. It's the life that he once dreamed of, but for some reason he doesn't feel anything. He looks down at Kuramov, telling him that he refuses. Kuramov's confused, asking why, and Johan says that he has not only killed his family, also innocent serfs, people who did no wrong. Kuramov surprised, asking if he's really declining his offer over mere serfs. He grits his teeth out of frustration, asking why their deaths even matter, then says that it must be because his mother was a low-born serf. That insect blood has tainted him, and he needs to understand that the world's law is that the strong drink the blood of the weak. Johan grits his teeth and apologizes to Kegel, saying that he can't control his strength anymore. He swings, hitting Kuramov in the face, sending him flying backwards. He doesn't stop there as he comes in with blow after blow. He asks why he thinks that these were worthless lives and if the Emperor means that much. Why they think they're that great to begin with, to the point that they get to judge who deserves to live and who doesn't. The Danis armor begins to start warping on his skull. As blood fills Karamov's eyes, the last sight he sees is none other than Johan, each blow getting heavier and heavier as he is turning him into a meat crayon. Eventually, he's just twitching on the floor and Johan stands up with his fist covered in blood. Karamov, though somehow still alive, begins coughing and Johan starts to walk away. Karamov calls him a fool, saying that he should have taken his offer because now it's too late. The one who broke the Emperor's sword will only know suffering from this point on. John looks down at him as his hand goes limp. As those were his final words, John says, "This world accepts death." So naturally, all he ever thought about was to make money and survive. But they slaughtered everybody in his territory, including his family, and then tried to erase it. So even if the whole world becomes his enemy, he only did what had to be done, and he'll never regret his choices. Regardless of what anyone says, this is how he plans to live. Hopefully, he grabs his sword. In the middle of the night, a stone gate slowly creaks open, revealing a castle courtyard. A guard then approaches a wooden door to check on what's happening inside. When he opens the door, he sees Jane and her elven soldier standing there, and she begins to speak with a furious look on her face. Jane asks if what the soldier said is true. The elf, all beaten up, says yes and begs her to believe him. He explains that our hero appeared out of nowhere and started thrashing all the soldiers, and then with his own bare hands, he took out the knight Karamov, leaving her in utter shock. The soldier then says that was the last time they saw Karamov. And Jane is left speechless. She points to the courtyard and asks where the knight's body is if the story is true. The elf maiden shouts that it's absurd and that she needs proof to believe it. The soldier replies that he doesn't understand it either, but he saw everything happen with his own two eyes. Just then, another soldier arrives and announces that the pursuit party is ready. Jane then pulls herself together and starts walking with firm, determined steps. She turns to her troops and gives a clear order to everyone there. She commands them to pursue the target and take him out without hesitation. The elf maiden then reveals that the target of the hunt is our protagonist, Johan. The troops begin to move out to follow their leader's orders. She calls him a traitor and the prime suspect in Karamov's downfall. Jane then screams for them to hunt him down and bring him back one way or another. Meanwhile, our hero is running through the forest with a determined look on his face. Meanwhile, our hero is in the middle of a brawl with several elven soldiers. One of them screams in pain as he's struck by our protagonist. With a swift blow, our boy takes out another soldier without mercy. Jane then warns her troops not to face him alone. She orders them to block off all the roads to wear him down until he can't go on. The soldiers are shocked, wondering if Karamov is really gone. With a determined gaze, Jane says there's one thing they need to do. Their mission is to bring our hero's head to the Emperor. Our boy then remembers the last words of his brother, Philip. He told him to grab a wereoar and run to survive at all costs. In the present, Johan finds the stable and feels a moment of relief. Even so, he glances back suspiciously, still tense from the chase. He drops Karamov's body on the ground and thinks about what to do next. Our hero decides to keep carrying the armor to use as a shield. With great effort, he hefts the heavy body onto his back and continues on his way. Exhausted, he opens the stable door to find his only hope. Inside, he sees his father Gzin's warhorse, an imposing animal. Our protagonist approaches the horse and thanks his brother in his thoughts. With a smile, he says that with this animal, he'll finally be able to get some rest. He then decides his new companion needs a name. The horse stares at our hero with its bright, imposing blue eyes. So, he decides to name the horse Philip in honor of his late brother. Meanwhile, an elven soldier shouts that he saw something shining over there. He's sure it's the gleam of Danis steel and tells everyone to search. Suddenly, one of the soldiers hears a noise and realizes it's the sound of horse hooves. In the next moment, our hero flies past them on top of Philip. Our boy is completely focused on escaping as fast as he possibly can. One of the elves then yells in shock, seeing that it's Johan escaping on horseback. A moment later, our protagonist and his horse vanish into the darkness of the forest. The elven leader gets angry and orders his men to shoot him down. The archers then ready their crossbows and fire in our boy's direction, but the bolts hit Karamob's armor, which he's using as a shield. And just like that, Johan manages to escape through the night under the light of the full moon. He rides all night and finally manages to shake off his pursuers. After a long time, he arrives deep in the Black Forest. Our hero dismounts, exhausted, and thinks that it doesn't feel right to not bury a person, but he pushes that thought aside and focuses on what he really needs to do. The young man looks at Karam's armor and thinks it looks pretty expensive. He then picks up the knight's purple sword, which was lying on the ground. He realizes the weapon is light yet sturdy and remembers that it's made of Danish steel. With the sword in hand, our hero notices it has some strange runes. He then realizes it's an ancient imperial script and gets very curious. A voice in his head says the sword is the crest retriever. Our boy then wonders if it retrieves family crests and thinks the name is kind of creepy. He decides to take the sword and bury the knight's armor for now. Johan thinks it's a waste, but promises that one day he'll come back for it. He then grabs a shovel and starts digging a hole in the middle of the forest. With a lot of effort, our hero manages to finish digging the grave. After a while, he finally finishes burying everything and rests for a bit. Tired, he wonders if what he did was enough to get rid of the body. Our boy remembers that news of the knight's downfall will spread, and he also remembers the knight's last words, saying his future would be nothing but suffering. But he thinks to himself that his life was already tough long before any of this happened. Our hero then reflects on what to do now that he's homeless and broke. Suddenly, a noise in the darkness catches his attention, putting him on high alert. He spins around quickly to see what it is and braces for the worst. And just his luck, it was the same giant black wolf he had encountered before. Our protagonist is annoyed because the creature showed up right when he was completely exhausted. He knows he doesn't stand a chance of beating the monster in his current state, so his only option is to try to get to his horse and get out of there. Suddenly, one of the elven soldiers shouts excitedly that he's found our hero's horse. They capture the animal, and the leader says that Johan must be nearby. Our protagonist recognizes the wolves of Akitan and is shocked. They arrived so quickly. One of the elves spots him in the darkness and points at him with a cry of surprise. Immediately, the entire group aims their crossbows at our boy. Johan gets irritated, knowing there's no way he can fight all of them alone. He's trapped between the giant wolf in front of him and the soldiers right behind him. Our hero realizes there's nowhere to run and falls into total despair. He wonders if this is the end for him. But then something completely unexpected happens because the wolf ignores our boy and starts attacking the elven soldiers without mercy. The creature charges forward with fury, and one of the elves screams for help in a panic. Johan is confused, wondering why the monster didn't attack him first, but he soon realizes the wolf is clearing a path for his escape. Our hero understands that this is his only chance to get out of there alive. He knows he has to move because if not now, he will definitely meet his end. So with a yell, our protagonist sprints with all his might towards his horse. He pushes forward through the chaos to escape the situation. Our boy puts his foot in the stirrup and gets ready to mount his animal with a leap. Joan gets on the horse and grips the re tightly, and as he does, he starts to have some memories of his past. On his horse, our hero flees with a very determined look on his face. He then remembers when he was a child and a much simpler life. In the present, Johan continues his desperate escape through the dark forest. Various memories of his training and battles flash through his mind. He also recalls all the destruction he witnessed in his village. And with that, our boy leaves his burning home behind forever. Nearby, an elven soldier falls lifeless after the fight with the wolf. The giant creature then watches our protagonists escape from a distance. And after helping him, the wolf vanishes into the dark of the night. Its red eyes seem to give our hero one last warning. Further ahead, Joan comes across a checkpoint set up by the elven soldiers. He realizes all the exits are blocked and that he's cornered. Exhausted, our boy gets off his horse, having not eaten or slept properly. He never imagined he'd be hunted by the wolves of Akadon for 3 days straight. Our hero almost met his end several times because of their attacks. Now he's at his limit and no longer has the strength to hold his sword. He sees more soldiers and wonders if there's really no way out of this. Hiding, our boy is at a loss for what to do in this situation. But suddenly he spots a merchant caravan passing by. Johan then gets the idea to disguise himself as a merchant to escape. He thinks that if he looks like one of them, he might avoid suspicion. We're introduced to Eldons of the Katana Trading Company. One of the guards who has an eye patch calls out to Master Eldons. The guard says it's a knight in heavy armor. A mercenary named Kay tells them to prepare for battle, but another one named Gaz doesn't understand all the fuss. Garan then tells him to take a better look at the situation. On top of that, he's wearing a plate helm and red gauntlets. Kay then tells the kid to look at the sword at his hip. He points to the purple hilt and reveals that it's a Dana's steel sword. Even so, Gas thinks that fighting him won't accomplish anything. Kay gets annoyed and tells someone to get the idiot out of his way. Another mercenary pulls him by the ear and tells him to shut his mouth. The leader, Eldens, then gives an order for Garan and Kay to get ready. With a serious look, he tells them to attack on his signal. The two mercenaries then reply that they got the message. Eldens then approaches our hero with his men. Kay advises them to knock him off his horse first. When the fight starts, Eldens arrives and introduces himself as the leader of the trading company. Our protagonist is surprised to see a cat-like beastman. Eldens sees his men tense and ready to fight our hero. With cold sweat dripping down, he gets really nervous about the situation. Johan thinks they're suspicious and that he needs to get them to lower their guard. He then introduces himself and says he was attacked by bandits on the road. Our boy asks the leader to tell his men not to attack him. Eldens starts to laugh and says that as a merchant he has to be prepared. Johan then accepts the apology and gets ready to make a proposal. He asks if he can join their group since bandits took all his money. In exchange for food and shelter, our hero will protect their caravan. Eldens thinks for a moment, and since our boy seems strong, he accepts the deal. The leader says they're heading to Marseille and that it's going to be a long trip. Our protagonist thanks him for the help, but wonders where that place is. Eldens informs his men that Johan will be joining them for the time being, but with a serious look, he orders them to eliminate him if anything happens. The mercenaries agree to the order, though somewhat reluctantly. Our hero feels relieved and thinks that now all he needs to do is get past the checkpoint, and so the caravan continues its journey with our boy alongside them. Nearby, an elven soldier notices that something is coming their way. They are the wolves of Akitan, and they order the caravan to stop for an inspection. Johan then thinks that it's finally time, and he just needs to get through quietly. Eldens then introduces himself to the elf and says he's from the Gatana Trading Company. The soldier is shocked because the Marseille company is so powerful that not even the emperor can mess with them. The guard changes his tone and says they're hunting a traitor and need their help. Hearing this, our hero realizes the checkpoint was set up just to catch him. One of the elves points at our boy and orders him to take off his helmet to show his face. Johan gets really nervous, but makes up a story about having a skin condition to avoid being discovered. The soldiers make fun of him and tell him to hurry up and take off the helmet so they can see his messed up face. With a suspicious look, the leader asks if our protagonist is hiding something. Our hero then realizes there's no way out and he'll have to fight his way through. But suddenly the leader Eldens yells, telling everyone to stop this nonsense. He asks if the guard is doubting his company, and the elf tries to explain himself. The beastman gets angry and threatens to file a complaint directly with their commander. Furthermore, he says he'll make the complaint in person at the Marseille branch. The guard gets scared and tells his men to let the caravan pass without any more trouble. The other soldiers are annoyed, but clear the way for the group to continue their journey. The elf says our boy got lucky, and he breathes a sigh of relief for having escaped that one. And so the caravan continues its journey, and Johan thinks he's finally made it out. He looks back and sees the guards watching his departure from a distance. The elven soldiers stand there watching the caravan disappear down the road. Later that night, the group makes camp and Eldens organizes the night watch shifts. At the camp, Eldens is reviewing some papers before turning in. He then calls Joan over and tells him to go to sleep since he has no obligations there. Our protagonist is grateful for the kindness as he's exhausted after everything. He then grabs his sleeping bag to finally pass out after days without rest. Our boy tosses and turns, and one of the mercenaries notices that he's finally managed to fall asleep. He then sleeps soundly by the campfire, regaining his strength. Meanwhile, hidden in the darkness, someone is watching the camp from afar. The mysterious man has a sinister smile on his face and seems to have a plan in mind. He then tells his men to get ready for what's coming. A moment later, he reveals the plan is to surround the camp and attack all at once. Meanwhile, Johan dreams of his past life as a soldier in the army. He remembers a training exercise where he used a defensive tactic against a larger enemy. Because of this, he became an example to the other soldiers for his intelligence. He was then rewarded with a 5-day leave and accommodation for his achievement. Our boy salutes and shouts with pride to his commander. He gets excited thinking the military life suits him since he studied tactics before. But he soon remembers the downsides like the old-fashioned culture and the exhausting shifts. On top of that, the biggest problem of all was the salary, which was a total joke. In the dream, he's grabbed and realizes there's no escaping that place. The nightmare ends and our hero wakes up startled and in a cold sweat back at the camp. Our hero wakes up and realizes it was all just a bad dream. He sits up and complains that his whole body is sore because of the nightmare, but suddenly he senses that something strange is happening in the camp. The full moon lights up the sky and a shower of arrows starts raining down out of nowhere. Confused, our boy looks up and sees the projectiles coming right at him. With a quick move, he reaches out his hand to catch one of the arrows in midair. His eyes widen as he realizes the danger just in the nick of time. He narrowly manages to catch the arrow just before it hits him right in the face. He then realizes it's an attack and that the soldiers have finally found him. Annoyed, our hero gets up and decides he needs to alert the mercenaries. With all his might, he screams, warning that enemies are attacking the camp. The shout wakes everyone up, putting Eldons and the other mercenaries on high alert. The story then flashes back to 5 minutes before the attack alarm sounded. The mercenary Gaz is complaining to Kay about them having to do all the heavy lifting. Khan gets annoyed with the complaint and tells the kid to shut his mouth right now. Gaz is confused and doesn't understand why his companion is telling him off. Kay then explains that you can't trust a guy you barely know with guard duty. On top of that, he warns that acting without thinking won't get you very far in this line of work. The mercenary then asks why the young man decided to join their group. Gaz gets mad and says if he'd known the group was so cowardly, he never would have joined. Ken gets angry and asks if the kid ate something bad because it sounds like he's looking to meet his end. The mercenary then gets ready to teach the boy a lesson for his insolence. But suddenly, our hero's shout echoes through the camp, putting both of them on alert. Immediately after, a shower of arrows starts to fall and they dive to the ground. Ken acts fast and shields Gaz from the attack so he doesn't get hit. After the first wave, he notices the arrow shower has stopped for a moment. He then tells the kid to go provide support for the rest of the group in the battle, but Gaz panics and takes off running, screaming in fear and abandoning his post. Kay is furious at his cowardice and Gorn approaches to see if he's okay. The young man warns him that it's an enemy attack and that arrows came out of nowhere. Kay then asks where the coward is, but is more concerned about the leader's safety. Gon says that Eldons is hiding under the carriage and tells him to get ready. That moment, our hero appears and starts giving orders to the mercenaries. He tells them to form a defensive circle around the carriage to protect themselves. Our protagonist explains that they need to fight together since they don't know where the attack is coming from, but Kay glares at him and asks if he's their boss to be giving orders like that. The mercenary then says they handle their own business and tells Johan to fend for himself. Our boy is shocked by the guy's stubbornness in the middle of an attack. Even so, Gorn orders his men to grab their shields and prepare for a fight. Johan insists and asks for a shield since he's fought in similar situations before, but Eldon shouts that he's not getting anything and tells our hero to handle himself in the fight. Our boy is pretty upset, realizing that no one here trusts him to fight. Suddenly, his expression changes as he senses a new threat approaching in the darkness. A moment later, a horde of bandits with some really ugly faces charges the camp. Johan then realizes they aren't the wolves of Akitan and wonders if they're just bandits. The criminals keep charging at the group without a second thought. Khan then shouts and orders all his men to attack with full force. Our hero is shocked, wondering who's going to protect the carriage if everyone leaves. The fight breaks out and one of the mercenaries curses the bandits for attacking at night. The bandit leader yells to press forward since they have the advantage in numbers. Garan then screams for his men not to fall back or else they'll meet their end, but one of the bandits grabs him by the face and tells him to shut up with a powerful blow. Seeing this, Kay screams out in desperation, calling the name of Captain Goran, who's in danger. The bandit then raises his sword to deliver the final blow to the mercenary on the ground. Seeing this, our hero rushes to save him with his purple sword in hand. With a swift movement, he unleashes a slash of purple energy toward the enemy. The bandit is confused, not understanding what that light coming at him is. The attack then hits him dead on, cutting him in half with no chance to defend. Goran is in shock as he watches the scene, getting covered in the enemy's red liquid. Our protagonist then stands with his swords in hand. Realizing the power of his attack, our boy's sword glows with red runes, leaving the bandits in shock. The bandit leader then notices that the rune on the sword is absorbing the red liquid. He yells that it's a demonic sword, not understanding how a merchant's guard has something like that. Johan then takes advantage of their fear and shouts that he is a noble of the Yeast's family. Hearing this, Kay is shocked and confused by our hero's revelation. Goran is also surprised and wonders if he was a noble this whole time. In his thoughts, he wonders if changing the names to Yeasts will cause any problems. The bandits panic, knowing that messing with a noble will end very badly for them. With his sword glowing, he asks again if they will surrender or not. He then asks if they are going to surrender right now or if they'd rather meet their end by his sword. The bandits are terrified and he tells them to think carefully about their decision. Their leader starts to sweat, not knowing what to do in this situation. One by one, the bandits start dropping their swords on the ground. Soon, a pile of weapons forms on the campground. With their hands up, they surrender to our protagonist. Our hero then holds his sword and prepares to give his next command. He calls Garan and asks the mercenary to tie up all the prisoners. He warns that if anyone resists, the mercenary can finish them off. With the situation resolved, he asks Eldons what they should do now. Garan is worried about the noble and wonders if he'll be offended for being treated poorly, but Eldon says he'll smooth things over since they accepted him into the caravan willingly. He then approaches our boy and thanks him for his hard work that night. The Beastman then offers a reward, thinking that if he'd known, he would have given him a shield. Our hero says he doesn't need it, and that he's just happy everyone is safe. Eldons is surprised because our boy doesn't even want a reward for helping out. The two then stand there for a moment under the starlight. Our boy then asks if next time he could borrow a shield. Eldons agrees immediately and promises he'll lend him a shield without fail. Our hero says he wants to interrogate the prisoners, and the leader lets him go now that his status has been revealed. He says he'll speak more casually. He then kicks one of the prisoners and tells the guy to get a move on. The bandit groans in pain from the kick he just took from our boy. Our hero then asks who they are and why they attacked the caravan. The bandit reveals that they are soldiers from the exterminated Brit's family. He explains that months ago the family was betrayed and everyone was taken out. That the bandit then reveals that the attackers were the feared wolves of Akitan. They resisted, but when the noble executive arrived, they were defeated. Garan is surprised by the name Noble Executive and thinks he's heard it before, and he reveals that his name is Karamov, the emperor's own hunting dog. The bandit kneels and begs for forgiveness, as he didn't know the caravan belonged to a noble. He says the army hunted them down and that even the northerners turned their backs on them. So he says that stealing isn't justified, but they needed to survive somehow. Our hero then asks if there was any other reason they attacked the group. The bandit replies no, and that they only wanted the Merchant Guild's charter. Hearing this, Eldons becomes furious and yells that the charter is a matter of trust. He says they cause so much trouble, and Johan tells the leader to take it easy. Our hero then remembers Karamov saying the same thing about betraying the emperor with a serious look. He grits his teeth and finally understands what's happening. He realizes the emperor just needed an excuse to get rid of the nobles. He then remembers the knight and curses him for falling for the emperor's talk. Our boy realizes that in the end they are just victims of power just like him. Even so, he knows they are bandits and deciding their fate won't be easy. Kay then asks what to do with them and offers to get more information out of them, but our hero says that's not necessary as they've already told them everything they needed to. Suddenly, Jazz grabs his mace and decides to put an end to one of the prisoners. But before he can land the blow, Kay stops him with his own weapon. The mercenary defends the bandit and shows he's not going to let the kid continue. Gas is shocked and asks why he's stopping him from getting his revenge. Kay then says they don't have the right to punish them because they surrendered to the noble. Gaz looks embarrassed and agrees with Kay that he was in the wrong. Meanwhile, the bandits kneel and beg the knight to spare their lives. They cry and tremble with fear, knowing that their end is very near. Kay then turns to Johan and offers to finish them all off right there. With his hand on his sword, he waits for our hero's order to start the job. But to everyone's surprise, our boy tells them to ante and release the prisoners. The bandits are shocked and start crying with relief at his decision. Gas is outraged and asks why our protagonist is letting them live. Our hero ignores the young man and turns to the bandits with a message. He says he understands their situation, but being a bandit is never the solution. He then reveals that he also learned a trade to be able to survive. Eldons is shocked to hear a noble say he needed to learn a job. Goran also comments that he's only here for the good pay he gets. Our boy then says he will spare their lives on one condition. The bandits bow in gratitude and promise they will never forget his kindness. The group then prepares to leave, and our hero doesn't want any more trouble. But from a distance, the silhouette of a wolf watches everything from the top of a hill. The mysterious creature seems to be following the caravan steps. It's the same giant wolf with red eyes that our boy has met before. Before heading to Marcel, the group decides to stop in a village called Lutzbach. In the village of Lutzbach, the chief is informed that Eldons of the Gatana Company has arrived. The village leader then goes to meet the beastman to welcome him. Eldons greets him with an enthusiastic hug and says it's been months since they've seen each other. The chief hugs him back and asks if anything happened on the way there. The beastman explains that they ran into bandits and that things are looking bad with the emperor. The chief scolds him, warning that someone might hear him speaking ill of his majesty. Even so, Eldon says they managed to deliver everything thanks to a noble who helped them. The chief is surprised, but says that another noble also showed up there a few weeks ago. He says the guy was a fake noble and that he kicked him out of the village. Eldon laughs and says his friend hasn't changed his habit of acting without thinking of the consequences, but he assures him that the noble accompanying them is different and very brave. The chief is shocked because the guy didn't even ask for a reward for his good deed. He then thinks that having a knight in the village would be a great help against the bandits. Besides, a real knight would be strong enough to take out an entire group. The chief then invites our hero to stay in the village for a few weeks. Eldons refuses the invitation, but the chief insists and the two start to argue. The beastman then realizes his friend is trying to steal his companion. The chief then changes the subject and asks where the noble knight is. Meanwhile, our hero is sitting under a tree looking very tired. He's starving and about to pass out from weakness. Goran then approaches our hero to talk to him about something. He holds out his hand and offers something to our protagonist. The mercenary hands him a bag of coins and says it's the bandits' money. He explains that they sold everything the bandits had and it brought in a good amount of cash. Our hero asks if they aren't going to take any, and Gore says it was all his doing. Our boy then thinks for a moment about what to do with all that money, but to everyone's surprise, he hands the money back to Goran. The mercenary doesn't understand and says the spoils are his by right. Our hero then says he took his share and shows just a few coins. He insists that it's okay, but in his mind he's crying over the lost money. Even so, he knows that staying with the group is better than facing the wolves alone. Goran is touched and says they fought together like true companions. Our boy then shows a single coin and thinks this will make the guy like him even more. With that, he says his goodbyes and gets ready to continue on his way. Goran blushes and thinks that our hero's dignity is that of a true knight. Later, he gathers the other mercenaries to give them an important message. He says that Joan praised their efforts and that he's going to distribute the profits. Excited, he tells everyone to line up to receive their share of the money. The mercenaries are shocked, unable to believe they're actually getting something. They then look at him confused. The mercenaries then get super excited and start cheering in celebration. They raise their fists and shout our hero's name all through the village. Meanwhile, our boy is resting at a nearby inn. He finally manages to sleep in peace with his sword and a pretty funny-looking cap. But in the middle of the night, his room door starts to creak very slowly. And a moment later, the doorknob turns and the door opens carefully. Despite the noise, our hero keeps sleeping, completely unaware. Suddenly, a pair of red eyes appears in the darkness of the room, and an assassin prepares to take our boy out with his dagger. During the night, an assassin creeps up and tries to snatch our hero's sword, but John snaps awake and grabs the man's wrist with an iron grip. The attacker is in total shock. He never expected our boy to be awake. With his eyes glowing in the dark, our main character demands an answer. He then asks if the guy is one of Karamob's goons. The assassin panics and screams for our hero to let him go. Losing his patience, Johan just eats him, smashing him right through a cabinet. Lying on the floor all banged up, the man coughs and whimpers in fear. Our main character then walks over and steps on the attacker's leg. The man screams for help, realizing that Johan isn't your average human. The scene then rewinds 5 minutes back at the same inn. We see the village chief snoring his head off while two young men sneak up the stairs. They are Pra and Gamson, and they're plotting something against our guy. Gamson says that Vulan, the village's strongest guy, is going to take care of Johan. He also mentions that Pell, the horse fanatic, is already out there snatching the animal. Outside, Pell is completely blown away by the war ore and tries to calm it down. Meanwhile, Pra asks Gamson if the noble's sword is really that expensive. Gamson then asks Pra if he's ever seen a sword that could slice a man clean in half. He claims he saw the weapon split an armored soldier in two, easy as pie, and he says the knight is nothing without his sword, but a loud crash startles them, sprawled on the floor. Vulan is terrified as he sees our guy's blue eyes glowing in the darkness. A moment later, our hero drags the man out of the room while he screams for help. Outside, Gamson is completely stunned with no clue what's going on. Pra then grabs him by the shoulders and asks what the heck is happening, but Gamson just screams at him to run if he wants to stay alive. He can feel they've really messed up and wonders who is this guy. Just then, the village chief shows up and asks who the two idiots are. Without answering, the boys bolt out of the inn and into the night. Outside, Pell is already waiting with the horses and says they finally made it. Gamson then yells at him to hurry up and get ready to flee. Pella is confused and asks his friend where Vulan is. Angry, Gamson shouts that Vulan is a goner or is about to meet his end. He then tells everyone to get on their horses so they can get away as fast as possible. Pra says he can't just leave Vulan, but Gamson rushes him, afraid the noble will follow them. Suddenly, a massive explosion rips through the inn, destroying everything. Terrified, the three of them look back, unable to believe what just happened. They then see Joan landing on the roof surrounded by a terrifying red aura. With his eyes glowing, our hero glares at the boys with pure fury. The scene shifts to the outskirts of the Southern Empire in a grim place, and a hand holds a wooden mallet about to smash something. Two soldiers in armor finish nailing up a wooden sign. The notice says that these people stole from a noble, and for that their families have been punished, and the order came from the emperor himself of the Holy Cardian Bizolf Empire. One of the guards then asks what they stole to end up like that. He finds out the crime was stealing 1 chicken and 3 eggs from Baron Deverab. The soldier is shocked to learn they all met such a tragic end, and it was all because of such a small and insignificant crime. Meanwhile, in a tavern at night, the full moon lights up the sky. The caravan leader Eldons is having a quiet dinner at a table. He's enjoying his meal and having a drink to unwind, but a man runs in and says there's a problem involving Mr. Eldens. He reveals that Ganson was caught trying to steal from our hero, Johan. Eldens is startled and spits out his drink, shouting in surprise at the news. He gets annoyed, thinking he wanted to convince Johan to travel with them to Marcel. The Beastman then takes a deep breath and tries to calm down to think of a solution. He orders them to capture Ganson and for the rest of the group to pretend they know nothing. The messenger is impressed with his leader calmness in a moment of crisis. Inwardly, Eldens is panicking but tries to keep his composure. He thinks he needs to find a way to handle the noble just in case. And so, the caravan leader sits there alone, thinking about what to do next. Under the full moon, a blue flag flutters atop a wooden house. Inside, the village chief is wrapping up a meeting with other villagers. Suddenly, a man rushes in and shouts that things have gotten ugly. He tells them those troublemakers caught trying to rob the noble. The chief becomes furious and calls the boys useless, slamming his hand on the table. The other villagers panic and ask what they should do. The chief orders them to gather gifts for the noble and to include a slave. With a serious look, he also tells them to prepare for the boy's execution. The boy's parents become desperate and say he can't do that. The chief then completely loses it and throws a chair at them, calling them idiots. He screams, asking if they've already forgotten the emperor's decree. With a determined look, he says they need to act before the noble does. The law states that anyone who covets a noble's property will have their tongue cut out, or they could be sentenced to hanging along with their entire family. The parents are terrified because entire families have been wiped out for this before. The chief explains that it happened just for asking for 1 chicken and 3 eggs. He then yells and asks what they think the noble is going to do now for offending a noble. He will surely want to punish everyone. One of the men suggests asking for help from Count Jaren, the owner of this territory. But the chief just laughs and says nobles only care about their little games of honor. The village chief then slams his fist on the table and screams for the villagers to wake up. With tears in her eyes, one of the boys' mothers cries in silence. The other villagers just hang their heads without saying a word. The chief then asks if they think he feels good about doing this. He says it's for the good of the village and asks them to accept his decision. That night, the villagers gather around a large tree. The 3 young men are kneeling and tied up, crying in fear. Our hero watches everything with a serious expression, his hands bandaged. He thinks to himself that the situation has blown up way more than he expected. He thought they were assassins, but they're just kids who wanted his expensive sword. Because of this, he decides he's going to keep the weapon hidden from now on. Our guy then decides he'll scare them a little, and then let them go, sitting there with his sword. He looks exhausted from all the chaos. The village chief approaches with a nervous smile and asks if he's okay. With a sour look on his face, our main character yells that he is now okay. He then asks if this is how they welcome guests in this village. The chief immediately throws himself on the ground and apologizes desperately. He says it's all his fault for not being able to control the idiots. Our hero then says the scare was enough and tells everyone to leave. And finally, he raises a simple sword as if to teach them a lesson. With wide eyes, our hero watches the scene in disbelief. The chief then yells that he will cleanse the noble's honor with his own hands. Our guy thinks that this lunatic is just making the whole situation worse, but the chief insists that whoever tarnished the noble's honor deserves to meet their end. With a cry of rage, the chief brings the dagger down with all his might. The boy's mother screams in despair, covering her face with her hands. However, the dagger is stopped by something and digs into the ground with a heavy impact. With a furious look, our guy asks if the chief didn't hear him. It turns out our hero grabbed the chief's hand and stopped the blow. The village chief is terrified by our main character's reaction. The other villagers are also startled by the noble's actions. The crowd of villagers watches the scene in silence under the moonlight. Our guy then stands up and yells, asking if everyone there has gone crazy. He says if they want them to pay for their crimes, they should pay with money. Everyone falls silent, not understanding our hero's proposal. In his thoughts, he wonders if his love for cash was a bit too obvious. He then calls to cover it up and says he'll repeat himself. With a serious look, he asks how honor can be more valuable than life. Finally, he throws the dagger to the ground and tells them to release the boys. The chief then falls to his knees, crying and thanking him for his honorable decision. Kneeling, the villagers thank Johan for his kindness and promise to never forget. Soon after, the parents run to hug their children, crying with relief and joy. The chief also cries emotionally and apologizes in his thoughts to Eldens for ever doubting him. Meanwhile, Ganson apologizes to Johan for falling for some idiot scheme. An old man then scolds the youths, telling them they got lucky with our hero. Just then, the mercenary K approaches Gamson, who tells him to unti him already. The boy then complains that he never should have joined this unlucky bunch. Annoyed by his audacity, K grabs Ganson's head with great force. With a cold stare, he tells the boy to relax because it'll be easier this way. Gamson is terrified and stammers, asking what he's talking about. but in the blink of an eye, a red liquid flies everywhere. Our main character then turns around to see what happened behind him. With a serious face, he observes the scene, his blue eyes shining in the night. However, our guy is confused and doesn't quite get what just went down. Suddenly, Gamson's life is brutally taken by the mercenary K in front of everyone. His eyes widen in despair in his final moment of life, and then the young man falls lifelessly to the ground in a terrible scene. K holds his bloody dagger after doing the dirty work. Our hero is in shock and yells, asking what the hell he's doing, with a serious look case as he acted according to the imperial decree. He claims to have executed the one who coveted a noble's wealth. Furious, our guy shouts that he had made it very clear he didn't want any trouble. Gaz and Eldons are frightened by our main character's furious reaction. But K turns to Johan and says that even mercenaries have honor and rules. He explains that Gamson's actions tarnish the honor of the entire group. Calmly, the mercenary then begins to clean his battle sword. Our hero watches it all, still very serious about what just happened. K then offers his sword and says Joan can punish him if he thinks he was wrong. Our guy is surprised and starts to break out in a cold sweat at the mercenary's attitude. He realizes K is putting his own life on the line to defend his honor. With a trembling hand, our main character reaches for the sword K is offering. Eldons and Gaz watch the tense scene, not knowing what will happen, but our hero pushes the blade aside, refusing to take it, and finally he apologizes, saying he didn't consider K's position. Gaz and the leader Eldons shout in shock at our hero's action. K's jaw drops too because a noble would never apologize. Our guy then tells him to put the dagger away, and the mercenary awkwardly obeys. With the situation resolved, Johan thanks everyone there for their understanding. Later, Gaz chews K out for being so reckless with the noble. Meanwhile, Eldons looks at our hero with a sparkle in his eyes. The Beastman then realizes that this noble is completely different from the others. He thinks that Johan is brave and just, but without the arrogance of nobles. Because of this, Eldons decides he must make him an ally at all costs, and so the caravan continues its journey as the sun sets on the horizon. Our hero then takes out a pocket watch he received as a gift. He complains that he took the item because it looked expensive, but then discovered it's broken. With a sideways glance, he seems a little regretful of his choice, and to make matters worse, he realizes he's now got another mouth to feed. As they arrive at a wooden gate, someone shouts our hero's name. The village chief then approaches with gifts as a token of gratitude. Our guy then picks up the watch and wonders how it ended up there. The chief then offers a slave, saying he knows the region well. Our main character is shocked as he's never seen someone in such bad shape. And finally, he accepts the gift and tells them to give the boy a bath and some food. With the new boy in the group, our hero feels that having a slave is weird. Meanwhile, at the camp, the mercenaries thank Johan for the food. Our guy is sitting by the fire when the young man calls him master. With a smile, the boy thanks Johan and brings him a meal. But our hero tells him not to call him master and just use his name. The young man is embarrassed by the request, and our guy doesn't know what to think. Our main character then asks how someone so knowledgeable became a slave. Sitting by the fire, the young man says it's not a very pleasant story, but our hero insists since he knows bad stories too, and the boy agrees. He then explains that he was a weapons and armor seller in the East, but one day, a noble ordered him to smuggle gold for him. Our guy is surprised since that usually results in the death penalty. The young man explains that he needed money to help his sick siblings, and so he delivered the gold as the noble had instructed. However, the noble himself reported him using a fake mustache as a disguise. Our hero then realizes the noble used him and then threw him away. The boy reveals he didn't even get a trial because of the imperial decree. Our main character then gets angry and asks if he managed to help his siblings. With tears in his eyes, the young man says the guard stole all the money. He then cries and apologizes, saying he just got something in his eye. Our hero watches everything with a serious and thoughtful expression. He then realizes that this world is just too sick and cruel, because if you're weak, the nobles will exploit you, and no one dares to complain, like the soldiers from the Blitz family who became bandits to survive, or the people of Lute's back who were forced to sacrifice their own children, and even Goyd who was used and discarded by the nobility without a second thought. Our guy then wonders if this is right and finds it all very pathetic, but he remembers that he's being hunted and could meet his end at any moment. With that in mind, our main character calls out to Goyd, who answers, startled. He then says that they're comrades now and that they have to survive together. Goyd is surprised and blushes at our hero's words. Suddenly, a mercenary runs up to them and yells that a monster has appeared. Our guy sighed, tired, as it seems he won't get a minute of peace. He then gets up and runs with the soldier to see what's happening. Goody stays behind thinking about the promise to survive together. Our hero then joins the other mercenaries hiding in the bushes. They see a red aura and confirm that there's a monster nearby. With a serious look, our guy prepares himself for what's coming. As he stands there, someone from the back tells him to get down, but with a smile on his face, our main character says that it's okay. Our hero then orders the mercenaries to lower their weapons. With a smile, he says it's all right and they don't need to worry. Kay and Gaz are confused by the order, but our guy repeats it lower them. He then says he's going to check out the situation and walks toward the forest. The mercenaries are worried as fighting monsters requires special skills. Besides, they can't take any risks since their mission is to protect their leader, Eldens. Our guy then feels a familiar and chilling presence approaching. He sees a red aura and a pressure that freezes the soul coming from the darkness. It's the glowing red eyes in the dark that our hero already knows. It's the Black Wolf of Ilman, and he's sure it's the same one from before. He remembers that last time the wolf helped him by attacking the soldiers. Our main character knows the creature could have attacked him at any moment, but with a smile, he realizes the wolf has no intention of hurting him. Our hero then tells the monster to stop hiding and show itself. With a snarl, the giant wolf emerges from the darkness with its red eyes. Our guy then thanks it for saving his life last time. The mercenaries are shocked and wonder if Johan is a monster tamer. The wolf then gets closer and starts sniffing our main character's face. The creature then begins to lick our hero in a very affectionate way. The mercenaries are left with their mouths wide open, not understanding a thing that's going on. Our hero then tells everyone not to be scared because the wolf isn't evil. He reveals that the creature is actually the Dawn's messenger. With an excited smile, the leader Eldens seems to recognize the name, but our guy is confused, not understanding what the beastman is talking about. Eldens then recounts an old song from the Eastern Empire to explain. The legend speaks of a warrior who gave a name to a wolf on a night of war. The name was the Dawn's messenger, and the wolf bowed before the warrior with blue eyes. The wolf led the warrior in battles across the continent. At the end of the war, the hero brought peace, but met his end soon after. The wolf then mourned for 3 days and traveled to where heroes were needed. The legendary creature was the Dawn's messenger with bright blue eyes. Our guy then asks if the legend is correct because the wolf was known by another name. Eldens explains that the legend got twisted when it reached the Southern Empire, but the original story says the wolf punishes evil and submits to a hero. The beastman claims that this is written in the ancient texts of the empire. Our hero is then surprised to learn that the wolf is a legendary creature. With an excited smile, Eldens asks for permission to pet the wolf, but the creature snarls and shows its teeth, scaring the caravan leader. The beastman then gets scared and says it's probably better not to touch the animal. And finally, he realizes the wolf is only gentle with our main character, Johan. Eldens then remembers an important part of the Eastern folklore. The legend says that if you name a divine beast, it becomes your familiar. He then wonders if our hero is actually a legendary hero. The leader asks if Johan has given the wolf a name yet, and he says, not yet. Excited, Eldens suggests that he give the creature a name right then and there. Our guy is surprised because something incredible could happen if the legend is real. He then thinks of a name for the wolf and suggests calling it Keta, but our hero remembers the last time he saw Karamov and gets an idea with a determined look. He points at the wolf and names it Karamov. Eldens is shocked and yells, asking the reason for that strange name. Suddenly, a red aura surrounds the wolf, its eyes glowing. Our guy is startled by the creature's reaction to receiving its name. A blue light then appears and envelops the wolf in a powerful transformation. A beam of light descends from the heavens and strikes the creature dead on. Our hero and Eldens watch the scene, amazed by what's happening. Blue smoke fills the area, shrouding them both in darkness. Our main character is then blown away by the wolf's transformation. The creature is now the Dawn's messenger, Karam, with a blue aura. Its paws now glow with the new energy coursing through its body. And finally, it bows before our hero as his new familiar. Our hero then approaches the wolf to pet it calmly. With a smile, he says he's counting on his new friend, Karamov. He then tells Eldens that all of this is incredible, and the beastman agrees. Suddenly, the caravan leader throws himself to the ground and begins to bow. He says it's the first time he's ever seen a myth become reality before his very eyes. The beastman claims he has respected our guy from the moment they met, and for being chosen by the divine beast, he calls him the hero of hard times. Our main character is embarrassed by all the unexpected flattery. Gaz and the other mercenaries are also shocked by the revelation. Goid is also surprised to learn that his new master is a hero. Everyone then bows before our hero and his legendary wolf, but our guy apologizes and tells Eldens he's no hero. He explains he's just a wanderer from a small family trying to survive. Furthermore, he reveals that he's on the run for having finished off the real Kamov. Eldens is speechless, but our hero says he didn't want to disappoint him, with a determined look. The leader then makes a request to repay his kindness. He asks for permission to introduce Johan to the Marcel Merchants Guild. Our guy then asks what Marcel is, as he's never heard of the place. Eldens explains it's a free trade city and one of the few places the Emperor doesn't rule. Our hero then accepts the offer, and the leader thanks him deeply moved with a smile on his face. Our hero thinks about the opportunity in Marcel. As Eldon sings the legend, our guy gets a little worried. He thinks about this title, Caro of Hard Times, and reflects on it, but he knows he's just a wanderer trying to protect his own life. Because of this, he remembers the knight's warning about his future of pain. Even so, he clenches his fist, because his life has never been easy, because this time by his own will, he will move forward step by step. And with this newfound determination, they set off for the city of Marcel. After arriving in a new land, Johan was visibly astonished and exclaimed in disbelief, wondering whether this place was truly Marcel. Goiden was no less delighted, remarking with genuine emotion that he had never imagined he would be able to come there again. As Johan looked around at the surrounding scenery, he silently thought that since he was already in the city of merchants, he should do some shopping first. At that moment, Karamov happily barked a few times in a playful manner. Johan, seemingly intrigued, called out to it curiously and asked what it was doing. A nearby shop owner also bent down cheerfully, stroking Karamov's head while laughing and commenting that it was extremely cute, even offering it something to try. Seeing this, Johan paused for a moment and reminded himself inwardly that, in other people's eyes, Karamov was merely a cute puppy, for now, at least. The scene then shifted to the previous day, one day before entering Marcel. Johan gazed at Karamov with a contemplative expression. After a short while, he lifted his head and called Karamov's name. Sitting down, he gestured with both hands as he gently explained that perhaps things would be fine if Karamov were a tiny puppy, but if a monster like it entered the city, it would surely cause panic. Therefore, he asked whether Karamov could wait outside the city. Understanding his words, Karamov responded with a low growl before suddenly releasing a surge of power that enveloped its body. To Johan's astonishment, Karamov's form began to change. Moments later, it had completely transformed into an adorable little puppy. Karamov then looked up at Johan as if expecting praise and barked triumphantly. Witnessing this sight, Johan could not hide his confusion and exclaimed in shock, questioning whether Karamov had actually shrunk and wondering if this was one of the holy beast's abilities. Goiden, unable to restrain himself, rushed over and hugged Karamov tightly, marveling at how unbelievably cute it was. Johan, now free of his worries, let out a relieved sigh and remarked that at that size, there should not be any problems after all. Meanwhile, Goiden continued playing affectionately with Karamov. Returning to the present, the surrounding townspeople gathered around Johan, expressing their amazement at how adorable and unique the puppy looked, even speculating whether it was an imported pet. Goiden awkwardly smiled while holding Karamov and apologized, explaining that it was a bit ill-mannered. The shop owner casually replied that it was perfectly fine. Johan, however, grew increasingly uneasy, thinking that drawing attention to himself would not benefit him at all and that he should leave quickly, especially since he was currently on the run. While he was still lost in thought, Goiden called out to him from behind, addressing him as Lord Johan. With sparkling eyes and great enthusiasm, Goiden proposed that if Johan purchased a large bag for carrying items, along with some oil and vinegar, he would take responsibility for equipment maintenance from then on. Hearing this, Johan reacted with mild surprise. Realizing aloud that Goiden had once been an arms merchant, he then spread his hands and admitted that he only had 4 silver coins, questioning whether it was really possible to buy everything they needed. Goiden froze for a brief moment but quickly accepted the coins, confidently taking on the responsibility and telling Johan to leave it to him. With shining eyes, he firmly stated that he could handle everything using just 1 silver coin. Johan immediately laughed and told him not to push himself too hard, inwardly mocking the idea of accomplishing anything with a single silver coin. However, events unfolded far differently than Johan had expected. 50 minutes later, a fully packed backpack was thrown onto the ground. Goiden cheerfully wiped the sweat from his forehead and said with relief that it should be enough. Johan, standing nearby, was left utterly stunned, unable to believe that Goiden had truly managed everything with just 1 silver coin. Johan recalled the sequence of events that had just occurred. First, he had purchased his tactical bag along with a large supply backpack for Goiden, making item storage much more convenient. Everything had gone smoothly. As for the completely smashed helmet, Goiden had used his incredible gift of persuasion to sell it at a very high price, and even received a mace for free. As a result, Johan no longer needed to rely on the seal retriever unless absolutely necessary. On top of that, after buying vinegar and oil for equipment maintenance, along with all the other supplies, they had even received copper coins as change. Johan began calculating everything in his mind and found it strangely unbelievable. Their original balance had been 4 silver coins. Their expenditure amounted to 1 silver coin, while their revenue totaled 9 silver coins. Their current balance now stood at 12 silver coins and 10 copper coins. Their money had actually increased. Resting his chin on his hand, Johan pondered deeply. If even a broken helmet could sell for that much, he wondered how valuable Karamov's gear, which he himself had chewed up, might be. Suddenly, a confident smile spread across Johan's face as he decided that if he ever had to go back, he should dig it up and sell it as well. Johan turned to Goiden and remarked that he looked as though he was enjoying himself doing what he knew best, wondering whether his past as a merchant was the reason everything suited him so well. Goiden, feeling genuinely happy, closed his backpack and admitted that he had missed this life deeply. Facing Johan's confusion, Goiden explained without hesitation that becoming a slave who could die at any moment had forced him to live every single day in despair and fear. Johan listened with great emotion as Goiden continued, saying that after meeting Johan, whom he now addressed as Lord Johan, he was no longer a slave, and that it felt as though he had returned to his life as a merchant. With eyes full of hope, Goiden sincerely expressed his gratitude, declaring that even if he had never been a slave, he would still have chosen to follow Johan. Johan smiled gently and replied that he was happy to hear such words and that he would be relying on Goiden from now on. Hearing this, Goiden became extremely excited and loudly affirmed his loyalty. Johan, equally satisfied, suggested that they should enjoy Marcel together. The two of them soon sank into shared joy, and Goiden eagerly agreed. Thus, Johan, who had suffered for quite some time, finally experienced incomparable happiness upon arriving in the great commercial city of Marcel. The tavern was bustling with activity and filled with beautiful maids. Johan sat in a corner, gnawing on a rib, and silently evaluated the situation with tears of joy threatening to fall. He reflected that the jerky he had eaten while wandering tasted like leather boots, whereas the meat in Marcel was tender and melted in the mouth. Remembering his past hardships, he recalled how, during his travels, he had been unable to wash and had nearly gone insane from constant itching. His face brightened with happiness as he realized that in Marcel, he could take a warm bath whenever he wanted. He continued comparing the past and present, recalling that while wandering he had no proper place to sleep, and whenever he lay down, damp and cold stones had pressed painfully against his body. Now, lying joyfully on a warm mattress under soft blankets, he noted that in Marcel, he could sleep in a warm and fluffy bed. Johan firmly concluded that life in Marcel was the best, deciding then and there that he would settle down and live in the city. And so, Johan dreamed of a happy settlement in Marcel. However, fate did not roll the dice in his favor. The next day, at Marcel City Square, Johan continued his culinary sweep of the city. While happily chewing on grilled skewers, he mused about how peaceful everything felt and wondered how long it had been since he had last walked the streets in such comfort. Suddenly, he heard a nearby citizen let out a heavy sigh, expressing that the situation was bad. The man lamented that there had been yet another bandit attack. An elderly woman beside him helplessly added that she had heard Dave's daughter had been the victim this time, and that the bandits had even taken all the new stock. Johan continued eating his skewer while listening in. The woman went on to say that she was terrified of what news the next day might bring, questioning how anyone could live in peace with bandits running rampant like this. Walking beside Johan, Goiden whispered to him that it seemed there were bandits around Marcel as well, which likely explained why the town's atmosphere felt so tense. Before Goiden could finish speaking, a loud shout suddenly rang out ahead. A violent member of the Wolves of Aquitaine was yelling angrily at an elderly man, insisting that he had already said he would pay later and demanding to know whether the man understood who he was. The bandit, clearly agitated, kept ordering the old man to just give him one meat skewer, claiming that he had not eaten anything for 4 days. This man was a straggler from the mercenary group Wolves of Aquitaine, who had lost his main unit while chasing Johan and had wandered into Marcel merely to survive. He continued insisting that he would pay the money later, but suddenly froze in place in shock. Johan noticed that the man's face turned pale as he let out a strangled cry, simultaneously pointing directly at him. The Wolves of Aquitaine member rushed toward Johan while gripping the hilt of his sword, stammering in rage and disbelief. Johan clenched his teeth anxiously, realizing that the Wolves of Aquitaine had indeed tracked him all the way to Marcel and acknowledging inwardly that the situation was bad. His thoughts churned violently as he concluded that fighting here would do him no good at all. At that moment, the Wolves of Aquitaine mercenary leaped into the air, preparing to strike Johan down with a killing blow. Just as it seemed everything was truly over, a sharp steel blade flashed horizontally through the air. In an instant, the man's head was severed and fell to the ground. Nearby civilians screamed in terror as the severed head rolled to a stop, crying out in shock and disbelief. Bradil was the one who had just delivered that sword strike. From atop his horse, he angrily complained that he had thought the man was a bandit, only to realize that he was merely a petty robber, and he criticized the poor state of public safety that allowed all kinds of trash to crawl out. After that, Bradil turned his gaze toward Johan and asked with concern whether the wanderer was hurt anywhere. Goiden hesitated slightly before replying that he was not injured and expressed his gratitude, while Johan remained standing there in a daze. Hearing the response, Bradil felt relieved and broke into a bright smile, remarking that it was a relief and reminding them to always be careful. As soon as he finished speaking, he spurred his horse forward and loudly called out to gather attention. Lowering his head, he shouted at the top of his lungs to address the citizens of Marseille, causing everyone nearby to flinch and turn to look at him. Bradil continued riding forward, and behind him followed a large cavalry unit lined up in perfect formation. Identifying himself as Bradil, the oak tree mercenary captain, he lifted his head firmly and reassured the crowd not to worry. He then confidently declared that the 500-strong oak tree mercenaries would surely wipe out the bandit horde and make Marseille safe once again. Goiden could not help but look at him with admiration and exclaimed inwardly how amazing it was to see them in person. Johan, feeling curious, wondered whether they were famous. Goiden quickly explained that the oak tree mercenaries were indeed renowned as one of the top mercenary groups in the empire, and he confidently added that he had heard about bandits around Marseille and assumed the mercenaries had been hired to eliminate them. After hearing all this, Johan lowered his head and fell silent, as though lost in thought. His mind returned to the moment he had been attacked, and he realized that if it had not been for that man's help just now, his identity would have been exposed. Quietly staring at the skewer of roasted meat in his hand, Johan told himself that if that had happened, being hunted by the Empire would have made it impossible for him to remain in Marseille any longer. The ominous prophecies echoed once more in his subconscious, foretelling that his life ahead would be filled with nothing but pain. Johan bit his lip tightly in anguish, holding back his tears as those dark thoughts dragged him down. He forced himself to snap out of it, reminding himself that he was still a fugitive. With a heavy heart, he reasoned that the only way for him to survive was to build a good relationship with the Gitana Guild, since not even the Emperor could easily touch the guild. He recalled the moment Eldens had bowed his head before him and silently reflected that, fortunately, Eldens had looked upon him favorably, giving him a chance to interact with the Marseille Guild. Despite this, Johan's face remained dark with worry as he questioned what would happen if his identity were revealed before that. His thoughts spiraled endlessly as he concluded that even if they knew he was being chased by the Empire, they would absolutely not step forward to protect him. He firmly asserted to himself that if his identity were discovered before he established a solid relationship with Gitana, he would certainly be dead. Clenching his fist, Johan steeled his resolve. The goal was clear. He had to meet the Gitana Guild and seek protection from the Empire. His eyes shone with unprecedented determination as he resolved that until he built trust with the guild, his identity must never be revealed. At that moment, a voice called out to him from behind. A flag fluttered overhead as a woman respectfully bowed and introduced herself as Ivelka, the exclusive maid of the Gitana Guild. She went on to explain that she had heard of Johan's impressive exploits through Lord Eldans, and that the guild wished to form a deep connection with him, or possibly with his family. Lifting her head with a warm smile, she politely invited him to accompany her to the Gitana Guild. After receiving Ivelka's proposal, Johan agreed to move to the Gitana Merchant Group's Marseille branch. Goiden, despite carrying numerous items on his back, kindly sat down and called out to Karamov, telling it to give him its paw. Karamov happily gnawed on his finger while growling playfully, prompting Goiden to laugh and protest for it to stop biting him. The scene then shifted to the interior of a dimly lit room, where Johan sat tensely on a sofa, waiting. Pressing his lips together, he anxiously thought to himself that he had finally made it to the merchant group, a place that represented his best chance to turn things around, and he sincerely hoped that everything would go according to plan. While Johan was still lost in thought, someone approached from behind and addressed him, stating that he must be Sir Johan, and mentioning that they had heard quite a lot about him from Sir Eldens. The woman slowly stepped closer and expressed that it was an honor to officially meet him. She then bowed politely and introduced herself as Johan, the branch manager of the Gitana Merchant Group in Marseille. Raising her head with a friendly smile, Johan remarked that it was a pleasure. Johan hurriedly stood up and politely introduced himself as Johan of the Eights family, adding that the pleasure was all his. Johan cheerfully agreed and gestured for them to have some tea while discussing the details. Johan immediately accepted the suggestion, saying that it sounded like a plan. Once the hot tea was served, Johan happily explained that it was a trade good imported from the Mediterranean region and expressed her hope that it would suit Johan's palate. Holding the cup, Johan felt puzzled and wondered inwardly why it was clearly coffee, yet he maintained proper etiquette and thanked her, saying he would enjoy it. After taking a sip, he offered his observation that the aroma was quite striking and deduced that it was a tea brewed from roasted fruit seeds. Upon hearing this, Iona was delighted and firmly affirmed that Johan had assessed the situation precisely, praising his sharp eye and remarking that it was rare for someone to recognize it so easily. She then smoothly changed the subject and suggested that they move on to business. Speaking frankly, Iona stated that her group believed they already had a good understanding of why Sir Johan had come to them. The moment Johan heard this, he was so shocked that he spat out the tea he had just taken a sip of. He froze, inwardly panicking as he wondered whether they had already discovered that he was being pursued by the Emperor. Across from him, Iona continued to explain that the true reason for his visit was something else entirely. Frowning with visible intensity, she declared that Johan must surely harbor a grand ambition deep in his heart. This conclusion was completely unexpected for Johan. He straightened up in confusion, utterly baffled. Meanwhile, Iona's calm voice continued, explaining that she had heard many stories from Sir Eldon's, stories of how Johan had protected the innocent and shown mercy even to enemies who had surrendered. With sincerity, she questioned why a man like him would come to Marcel, a place crawling with bandits, and expressed that she could see Johan's ambition to save Marcel with his own two hands. Feeling overwhelmed, Johan clutched his head helplessly, thinking to himself that he had no idea what she was talking about, but decided it would be best to play along for the moment. He then sighed and outwardly admitted that she had seen right through him. Iona responded with a warm, understanding smile, remarking that ambition was not a bad thing at all, but rather a virtue for those worthy of it. Her expression suddenly darkened as she leaned closer to Johan and whispered that the Gitana merchant group loved to support the ambitions of those who truly had what it took. Johan immediately sensed the true nature of the situation and inwardly exclaimed that this was exactly what he had been waiting for, the unmistakable scent of a deal. Extending her hand, Iona continued by adding that, if Johan was interested, she could even introduce him to the governor of Marcel. This condition caused Johan's resolve to waver. He lifted his head in shock, realizing that the governor was essentially the city's mayor, and that this meant he could gain not only the backing of the merchant group, but also the mayor himself. Excitement surged within him as he calculated that, if that happened, even the emperor's grandfather would find it a tremendous headache to lay a hand on him. He concluded inwardly that he had to accept this deal, no matter what. Letting out a hearty laugh, Johan expressed his appreciation for the offer, but asked cautiously if he could know exactly what this so-called sponsorship entailed. Iona answered with complete confidence, explaining that sponsorship from the Gitana merchant group meant access to every service they provided, including restaurants, inns, and even entertainment, all enjoyed under the name of Gitana. She added playfully that, of course, if Johan became too greedy, they would have no choice but to cut him off. After a brief pause, she raised a finger and stated that there was, however, one condition. Turning serious, Iona declared that Johan must promise them a single thing. Whenever the Gitana merchant group had need of him, he would fight under their banner. Johan, equally serious now, asked whether that meant they wanted him to deal with the bandits threatening the town. Iona quickly denied this and clarified that the Oak mercenary group had already been dispatched to handle the bandits. She explained that they had something else in mind for him. Proceeding with great caution, Johan asked what this something else was. In response, Iona smiled meaningfully and confidently tapped her temple as she explained that recently the number of shopkeepers acting against the Gitana merchant group had been increasing. These shopkeepers claimed that Gitana was monopolizing the market, and as their complaints grew louder, they had become an increasingly troublesome nuisance. A frightening glint flashed across Iona's face as she stated that they wanted Johan to eliminate those disgruntled shopkeepers, and, if possible, their children as well, adding coldly that this was their only condition. Fixing Johan with an intense, piercing stare, she asked whether he accepted their proposal. Johan sat there with his arms crossed, thinking for a long time. His lips pressed tightly together and his eyes lowered, as though he were wrestling with an extremely important decision. By the time the conversation ended, the sun was already beginning to set. With a darkened expression, Johan left the Marcel branch of the Gitana merchant group. The moment Goidan saw him, he stood up cheerfully and asked whether Johan was back and if the meeting with the merchant group had gone well. Johan stood there silently, saying nothing. Growing uneasy, Goidan called out to him once more, addressing him again in concern. At that very moment, Johan suddenly broke into a smile. Overflowing with excitement, he enthusiastically declared to Goidan that they should go and live the high life together. This abrupt shift in his attitude left Goidan completely stunned, as he blankly wondered what Johan meant by living the high life. To clarify the reason behind Johan's sudden change, the narration returned to an earlier moment, 1 hour prior. At that time, Johan had responded to Iona by firmly declining her proposal. He explained that in a massive city like this, it was only natural for people to complain about distribution monopolies. However, he hesitated briefly before bowing his head and expressing his deep unease, stating that killing people instead of resolving matters through dialogue, especially involving children, was something he could not accept. Johan then resolutely declared that he would not kill innocent people for such a reason and insisted that the deal should be treated as if it had never happened. Upon hearing his answer, Iona's expression darkened noticeably. She stared at Johan in silence, while he met her gaze with equal determination. Moments later, she suddenly smiled. Iona then congratulated Johan, stating that he had passed. This unexpected reaction left Johan bewildered, prompting him to wonder what she meant. Iona nodded and explained that the entire situation had been a test to determine whether Johan was truly worthy of their support. She addressed him as a righteous knight and politely asked for forgiveness for her rudeness. Still somewhat flustered, Johan quickly asked about the alleged monopoly and the complaints surrounding it. With a cheerful smile, Iona clarified that the Getana merchant group had never monopolized distribution, nor had they earned resentment from local shops. On the contrary, she explained that the group provided high-quality goods at fair market prices and was actually quite popular among merchants. She added that Johan had no idea how many other groups were secretly skimming profits behind the scenes. Once again, Iona brought up the condition she had mentioned earlier, clarifying that she was not asking Johan to rush into a war zone immediately. She honestly explained that since the Oak mercenary group was already out hunting bandits, Johan could, for the time being, simply relax and enjoy Gitana's hospitality. After laying everything out, Iona smiled brightly and extended her hand, asking Johan whether he would join hands with her. Having fully understood the situation, Johan smiled gently and eagerly reached out in response, agreeing to the partnership. The two clasped hands in what felt like a solemn promise, invoking the grace of St. Luark and expressing hope that their alliance would be mutually beneficial. Returning to the present, Goiden was still visibly confused and asked what Johan actually meant by living the high life. Johan, whose cheeks had flushed red with happiness, explained enthusiastically that living the high life meant going out to eat something incredibly expensive. On the Gitana Merchant Group's tab, no less. Hearing this, Goiden smiled brightly and asked if everything had gone well. Walking ahead with excitement, Johan replied that it had gone perfectly and proudly announced that he had finally secured sponsorship from the merchant group. Goiden became just as excited and congratulated him enthusiastically, to which Johan responded with sincere thanks. Johan then lifted his gaze toward the distance and reflected silently that being sponsored the moment he stepped into Marseille meant everything was falling perfectly into place. His hand clenched slightly as he thought about the troublesome bandits nearby, believing that once the Oak mercenaries wiped them out, the city would soon return to normal. Filled with anticipation for the future, Johan felt that the happy life he had long dreamed of was finally within reach, and that it was time to relax and enjoy himself to the fullest. Suddenly, as the two were moving along, a piercing scream rang out. Nearby, a massive fly hovered over the scene where an unconscious person lay on the ground with blood flowing from their eyes, nose, and mouth. Flies swarmed around the body, and terrified citizens gathered around the horrific sight. Upon witnessing the scene, Johan was deeply shaken. Staring blankly at the bodies piled together, he wondered in disbelief why there were corpses in a place like this. At that moment, someone called out to him. It was Goran, who approached and greeted him. Johan turned toward him in mild surprise and asked whether Goran knew what was happening. Goran looked toward the bodies and spoke sorrowfully, explaining that the bandits around Marseille had become increasingly depraved. He stated that they had been murdering the families of the city's merchants and dumping their bodies like this, effectively holding the city of Marseille hostage. On the other side, the corpses clearly showed signs of brutal torture, with fresh blood pooling beneath them. Another scream echoed through the crowd, startling Johan. The citizens began shouting in anger, expressing that the bandit situation had not been resolved at all and that the city of Marseille needed to be held responsible for what had happened. Another person voiced deep concern, saying that they had heard rumors claiming that the emperor himself was instigating the bandits, an idea they found utterly insane. One after another, people took turns shouting, insisting that there was no way the emperor would do such a thing unless he had completely lost his sanity. Someone snapped back, demanding that such words be watched, while others fiercely defended the emperor's dignity, arguing that His Majesty would never stoop to something so disgraceful. The situation quickly descended into utter chaos as heated arguments erupted everywhere. Some dismissed the emperor's authority outright, accusing him of clearly targeting Marseille, while others furiously condemned such statements as blasphemy and demanded silence. Certain voices even claimed that God would surely strike down an impious emperor, only to be shouted down by others who questioned whether a senile ruler could possibly maintain power and accused their opponents of daring to defy the Holy Empire itself. Standing amid the uproar, Johan bit his lip in irritation. He bitterly lamented to himself that the peaceful life he had finally found in Marcel was being completely ruined by these bandits. Grinding his teeth, he cursed inwardly, wondering what those mercenary bastards were even doing. Inside the Marcel branch of the Getana merchant group, urgent knocking echoed through the halls. Ivelka rushed inside to report, apologetically addressing Iona and stating that a serious problem had arisen. Iona, clutching her aching forehead, replied that if the issue concerned the bodies sent by the bandits, she was already aware of it, and she demanded to know what on earth the Oak mercenary group was doing. Ivelka hesitated before responding, clearly tense, and then revealed that all contact with the Oak mercenary group had been completely lost. This revelation stunned Iona, leaving her frozen as she questioned how such a thing could possibly happen. Ivelka quickly explained that the previous day, the body of a messenger had been discovered in the forest near Marcel, and that the condition of the corpse had been truly horrific. After hearing this, Iona lowered her head, her expression darkening as she fell into deep thought. Gritting her teeth, she told herself that the Oak mercenary group possessed military power comparable to a fortress, and that there was no way one of the Empire's top mercenary forces could be wiped out by mere bandits. Suddenly she leapt to her feet in anger, slammed the desk, and shouted Ivelka's name. Startled, Ivelka immediately responded in fear. Iona, visibly tense, ordered her to bring Master Swetelga, known as the Mage of the Iphael River, explaining that she needed to confirm through his prophecy whether the mercenary group had truly been annihilated. The scene shifted to the Iphael River, where clear blue water cascaded down from above. An elderly man extended his hand into the flowing water, sensing its chill as he murmured thoughtfully that he could see clearly now. He remarked that Getana was searching in the wrong direction, asserting that looking for the Oak mercenary group would not change anything. Upon seeing Johan's face reflected below, the old man suddenly laughed, stating that the man who had killed the Emperor's hound and fled was now attempting to hide within Marcel's wealth. His expression darkened as he firmly declared that things would not proceed according to Johan's plans. Back at the Getana Trading Company's Marcel branch, the atmosphere was heavy and oppressive. The door creaked open as Lord Swetelga entered, clearing his throat. His sudden appearance caused Ivelka to blurt out in surprise before she hurriedly welcomed him, expressing her gratitude for answering Getana's request. Lord Swetelga, however, cast her a dark glance and questioned how she could claim to be thankful after sending someone who drove the carriage like a madman, remarking that he had nearly broken his back. Terrified, Ivelka immediately apologized profusely. She then turned to announce that she would go fetch Lady Iona, only for Lord Swetelga to stop her, saying it was unnecessary. Confused, Ivelka asked for clarification, prompting Lord Swetelga to explain that if the matter had truly been urgent, Iona would have come herself. Ivelka stood frozen in awkward silence, unsure how to respond. As she seemed about to speak, Lord Swetelga sternly warned her not to make him repeat himself. She instantly complied, affirming her obedience. Taking a seat, Lord Swetelga cleared his throat once more, stroked his long beard, and stated that according to the voice of the Iphael River, he was destined to meet someone there. At the same time, outside the building, Lohan looked up in excitement at the Marcel branch of the Getana Trading Company before him. He reflected that the day he would finally meet Marcel's governor had arrived. Filled with determination, he resolved to win the governor's favor, settle down permanently in Marcel, put an end to his wandering life, and escape being hunted by the emperor. He proudly acknowledged to himself that he had made it to the second round of an interview at a major corporation. Throughout the long corridor, only Lohan's footsteps echoed. As he walked, he muttered to himself with a hint of excitement, wondering what the governor might like and thinking that perhaps he should have asked Ion beforehand. Suddenly Karamov came to an abrupt halt and let out a low growl. Finding this strange, Lohan asked what was wrong with him. At that moment he realized that Lord Swetelga was standing right in front of them. Stroking his beard, the old man calmly remarked that the name Karamov did not seem fitting for a divine beast. Seeing Lord Swetelga before him, Johan could not help but feel tense. Inwardly, he questioned how this old man could possibly know that Karamov was a divine beast. Without hesitation, Johan directly asked who the man was. Lord Swetelga paused briefly before replying that it seemed Johan did not know him. He then introduced himself straightforwardly, stating that his name was Swetelga and that he was the sage of the Iphael River, repeating the title as if to emphasize it. Johan narrowed his eyes slightly and expressed his doubt, murmuring about the word sage. Seemingly understanding Johan's hesitation, Swetelga summarized it simply by saying that he was a mage. Only then did realization dawn on Johan. He reacted in astonishment, his face flushing with excitement as he recalled that this world truly had magic. Growing more animated, he exclaimed to himself that although he had come to meet the governor, he had unexpectedly encountered a mage as well, and that big cities were indeed different. Johan then rushed forward and hugged Swetelga tightly, expressing that it was an honor to meet him and confessing that he had always wanted to meet a mage at least once in his life. Those words made Swetelga blush deeply. Embarrassed, he awkwardly asked if that was really so, but then hesitantly pointed out that for someone being hunted by the Emperor, Johan seemed to be doing rather well. Johan instantly froze in place, his eyes widening in shock as he asked how Swetelga knew about that. Calmly stroking his long beard, Swetelga explained that it was through magic, specifically through the mystery of the Ifayel River. He stated that through the river he was able to see both the past and the future. At that point, Johan could no longer remain cheerful. With a serious expression, he asked whether Swetelga intended to report him to the Emperor. Looking straight at Johan, Swetelga calmly asked why he would do such a thing. Johan was deeply shaken by this response, his eyes filled with confusion. Turning slightly, Swetelga explained that Johan should consider who he truly was. He described himself as one who knew the secrets of the Ifayel River, a seeker of mysteries within the laws of nature, and declared that he had no interest whatsoever in the petty political struggles of the secular world. He firmly stated that only the voice of the Ifayel River moved him. Johan began to feel curious about that place and silently repeated the name of the Ifayel River in his mind. Swetelga glanced at him and continued, adding that if he had intended to report Johan, he would have done so quietly and questioned why he would openly mention it right in front of him otherwise. Only then was Johan able to breathe a sigh of relief. Smiling faintly to reassure himself, he admitted inwardly that Swetelga was right. Regaining his composure in an instant, Johan suddenly grabbed Swetelga's hand and earnestly asked if he could hear about magic from him and whether that would be acceptable. Caught off guard and still embarrassed, Swetelga let out a confused sound. Looking into Johan's eyes, which were overflowing with excitement, he could not help but feel puzzled, wondering what was wrong with this man and thinking that a normal knight should have behaved very differently. He recalled how people in the past had looked down on him, mocking mages as cowardly scholars who knew nothing of honor in battle and spent their days muttering eerie nonsense. Returning to the present, Swetelga suddenly realized that this must be the reason why he was so confused. He could not understand why this knight was lighting up with excitement over magic. Johan continued pressing eagerly, asking how magic was used and whether even an ordinary person like himself could use it. Faced with such enthusiasm, Swetelga grew unaccustomed and hesitated awkwardly. In contrast, Johan had already begun plotting for his own future, thinking that this was his chance to learn magic and become a magic swordsman, and believing that if he achieved that, his chances of survival would surely increase. Swetelga took a small step back and stroked his beard to calm himself before finally agreeing. He stated that their meeting was a matter of fate and that it was not as though he could not tell Johan about magic. Johan looked up with a hint of disappointment and let out a small sound of reaction. Swetelga then continued, adding that teaching him outright for free would be too boring. He proposed that if Johan managed to win even a single round in a game against him, he would teach him magic. Still somewhat dazed, Johan reacted with mild dismay before lifting his head in confusion and asking what kind of game Swetelga meant, wondering if it was chess and suggesting whether they could do something else instead, such as arm wrestling. In Johan's imagination, he could easily defeat Swetelga in an arm wrestling match, and he even envisioned himself shouting triumphantly. At the same time, a reminder surfaced in his mind, warning him not to use his strength against the elderly or the weak. Hearing this, Swetelga could not help but laugh, remarking that arm wrestling would obviously give Johan the advantage, though he clarified that he was not referring to chess and instructed Johan to follow him instead. As he turned and walked away, Swetelga confidently stated that although the game of kings was entertaining, it could not compare to the game of gods. Johan followed behind with growing unease, silently wondering what the so-called game of gods might be. Swetelga then produced a go board and placed 2 small containers on the table. Johan, overwhelmed with tension, nearly cried out as he realized what it was. Upon seeing several stones already placed on the board, he immediately recognized that it was Go. Noticing Johan frozen in place, Swetelga told him to sit down for the time being. Stroking his chin, Swetelga asked whether it looked complicated and reassured him not to worry, promising to go easy on him. On the other hand, Johan reassured himself internally that luck was once again on his side. He recalled his past with pride, remembering that he had once won a 4th Dan Go tournament. With a confident smile, he convinced himself that he could win. As he picked up a handful of stones, he admitted to himself that he did not know how skilled the old man truly was, but he firmly resolved that he would defeat him. Across from him, Swetelga began the match by announcing that he would start with an easy move. Johan, full of confidence, told himself that victory was certain. He responded politely, expressing his thanks in advance. As Johan made his opening move, an intense energy radiated from him, and he inwardly declared that he would make Swetelga's knowledge of magic his own. 50 minutes later, the atmosphere grew heavier than ever. Johan stared intently at Swetelga, straining under the pressure. Swetelga lifted his head and let out a deep sigh. Johan hesitantly addressed him, but before he could finish, Swetelga abruptly widened his eyes and asked to take back a few moves. Johan flatly refused, pointing out that Swetelga had already taken back moves 5 times. In frustration, Swetelga slammed his fist onto the board, sending stones flying everywhere. In agony, he exclaimed that none of this made sense and questioned how he could be losing in the game of gods. He then stared at Johan in disbelief, demanding to know whether this was truly Johan's first time playing and declaring that even the Sultan of the Eastern Empire had never surpassed him. Johan concealed the truth and laughed gently, attributing Swetelga's loss to how well he taught. Hearing this, Swetelga grew embarrassed and cleared his throat. He then raised one finger and proposed another match, stating that if he lost again, he would give Johan a gift that would help him in life. Johan was secretly overjoyed, reacting with excitement and speculating whether the gift might be a magical item. After clearing his throat and pretending to deliberate, Johan agreed on the condition that Swetelga specify how many handicap stones he wanted. Swetelga became visibly tense, blushing as he struggled to regain his composure before finally asking for 3 handicap stones. Johan accepted without hesitation and made the first move, announcing that they should begin. Sometime later, under dim lighting and in near silence, Swetelga curiously asked why Johan, being of noble birth, was so interested in magic. Johan frowned and explained helplessly that the emperor wanted him dead and that it would be better to have more tools at his disposal. Swetelga studied Johan's move and asserted that if Johan intended to use magic for combat, they should stop there, as the knowledge he could offer was not meant for that purpose. Johan was stunned by this revelation and questioned whether magic truly could not be used in combat. This visibly irritated Swetelga, who asked whether Johan had seriously planned to fight using magic. Lowering his head as he picked up another handful of stones, Swetelga stated that although he had made a promise, he would at least answer that question. He explained that he had heard of individuals who did apply magic to combat. Johan excitedly interrupted, expressing his delight upon learning that such people existed. Swetelga immediately raised his voice and demanded that Johan listen first. Johan froze in confusion and fell silent. He listened as Swetelga explained that those commonly referred to as mages were primarily people who uncovered the mysteries of nature, some through the wind, others through fire, and a few through the smoke of burning sulfur. Swetelga calmly recounted that a certain fool had once even bragged about discovering a mystery within the Black Forest. As Johan listened, he silently assessed the story, thinking to himself that the last part sounded strangely personal. Swetelga continued his explanation, stating that those discovered mysteries were known as spirits, and that mages borrowed the power of those spirits. He then offered a cautious warning, explaining that spirits usually lent their power without asking for anything in return, but that there were times when their whims demanded a fatal price. Fixing his gaze firmly on Johan, Swetelga emphasized that even if one came into contact with a mystery, one had to be careful not to go against its will. Johan reacted quickly, nodding as he replied that he understood, though his thoughts were already in turmoil. He reflected inwardly on how dangerous the setting of this world truly was, deciding that he would not risk his life trying to explore the laws of nature. His inner voice grew subdued as he abandoned the idea of becoming a magic swordsman altogether, doubting whether magic items even existed in the first place. No wonder, he mused, things had gone so smoothly for him until now. At that moment, a shout suddenly echoed through the area, as someone exclaimed in shock that Lord Swetelga was present. Hurried footsteps rang out in the hallway outside. Iona angrily demanded to know why she had not been informed earlier. In response, Ivelka panicked as she explained that Swetelga had strongly insisted that no one be told. Still fuming, Iona complained that mages were truly troublesome to deal with, adding that she had even told him the situation was urgent. Before long, they arrived at their destination. Someone pointed out that Swetelga was indeed there. Iona, wearing a friendly expression, opened the door to greet him, but the sight before her was a grave and tense atmosphere between Swetelga and Johan. She froze in confusion, letting out a small, startled sound. Panic rose within her as she realized that Swetelga was once again teasing someone with the so-called game of gods, and that this time it appeared to be Sir Johan. Bewildered, she let out another confused sound. Suddenly, Swetelga sprang to his feet in agitation, pleading to be allowed to take back a single move. Johan, utterly helpless, called out to him. Meanwhile, Iona stared in disbelief, wondering how it was possible that Lord Swetelga was actually losing in the game of gods. Her curiosity deepened as she looked at Johan, who was smiling brightly across the board, and she questioned just what kind of person Sir Johan truly was. Johan, filled with excitement, urged him to simply accept his loss. At that point, Iona spoke up again, exclaiming in surprise as she greeted Lord Swetelga, remarking that she had not realized he was there. She approached him warmly and remarked that if he had come to Marcel, he should have contacted her, asking whether he had been enjoying a pleasant time with Sir Johan. Swetelga laughed heartily as he stroked his long beard, replying that he had merely been playing a few games with the knight. Iona responded in understanding. Using her arrival as an excuse, Swetelga moved to disperse the chessboard, remarking that since the branch manager had arrived, they would unfortunately have to end the game there. Johan, who had been preparing to make his next move, froze when he saw that the board had already been cleared. Just then, Swetelga placed 2 flasks, one red and one blue, onto the table and instructed Johan to take them. Johan stared at them in confusion and asked what they were. Swetelga swiftly explained that he had not forgotten his promise, revealing that they were water flasks containing the final secrets of the Isekai River, known respectively as the Water of Wrath and the Water of Blessing. At that moment, at the Oak Tree Mercenaries' outpost, fear was clearly etched into someone's eyes. The 3-member squad had all drawn their swords, trembling as they stammered in terror, expressing their disbelief at what they were seeing. Before them stood a mysterious entity that continuously radiated an overwhelming killing intent. With a twisted face and an abnormal body, the being finally revealed itself. The murderous aura it released was so oppressive that it threatened to drive any human mind into madness. The leader of the mercenary group, Bradil, fell into panic and shouted in hysteria that the creature was not a bandit. After that outburst, nothing remained in Bradil's eyes except pure horror. Throughout the silent forest, piercing screams echoed endlessly as someone let out a final, agonized cry. The scene then shifted back to the Gitana Trading Company, Marcel branch. Johan, visibly excited, held his reward and questioned whether the 2 items he received were the Water of Wrath and the Water of Blessing. Lord Swetelga calmly explained that since ancient times the Isekai River had concealed a long-guarded secret, the mystery of life and death, and that he himself had devoted his entire life to uncovering it, only for the river to never reveal its answer to him. He emphasized that everything had changed only after Johan appeared. Lord Swetelga then went on to thoroughly explain the effects of the 2 flasks, stating that as long as one's head was not completely severed, the red flask could heal any injury without issue, no matter how severe. As for the green flask, he explained that it was capable of melting a person with just a single drop. Johan reacted with uncontrollable excitement, marveling that he had never imagined receiving magical items like these. He expressed his gratitude repeatedly, remarking in awe that magic items truly did exist, and added that these potions had finally put his mind at ease. Immediately afterward, Lord Swetelga turned to Johan and asked whether the branch manager had summoned him because of the prophecy. Johan politely confirmed that this was correct and reported that bandits had appeared around Marcel, causing numerous civilian casualties. She quickly added that the trading company had dispatched the Oak Tree Mercenaries to handle the situation, but they had been unable to make contact with them for several days. Hesitating, she began to speculate whether the mercenaries might have failed, but before she could finish her sentence, Lord Swetelga decisively concluded that they had already failed 3 days ago. Shock completely overtook Johan's expression. With a grave demeanor, Lord Swetelga began recounting the prophecy, stating that the voice of the Isekai River had spoken of a vision. Southeast of Marcel, the will of the oak tree would be trampled by a rock of steel, their fate cut down behind a veil, and the flames that would engulf the city would go unchecked. He concluded that this was what the voice of the Isekai River had foretold and that the oak tree mercenaries had most likely been wiped out. Filled with fear, Johan remarked that it was hard to believe the oak tree mercenaries could lose to mere bandits and insisted that the situation called for a city council meeting. She urged Johan that it was time to act under the banner of the council. Johan accepted her proposal with a serious expression, stating that he understood. At that moment, in a meeting room that had already been fully prepared, a group of people entered with visible enthusiasm. One of them wore a sly smile, his mustache lifting along with the corners of his mouth in a cunning grin. Leading 2 other nobles, he loudly announced that it seemed he had arrived late. This man was Baron Ombec Vivant Auvergne. Taking his seat at the head of the table, he declared that it was time to begin the council for Marcel and the Emperor. His mustache curved sharply, twitching slightly as he spoke. Watching this, Johan felt irritated and thought to himself that the ridiculous mustache was unbearable, noting internally that there truly were many strange individuals in the medieval era. Shortly after, another person spoke up in a refined manner, formally greeting all the members of the city council. The man introduced himself with polished courtesy, stating that, as most of those present already knew, he was Velako, the city's governor. Hearing that name, Johan's thoughts instantly lit up with meaning, as he realized that this was none other than Marcel's governor, Velako Tranayani Velako. Johan immediately concluded that if he ever wanted to settle down in a city beyond even the emperor's reach, he would have to get on Velako's good side at all costs. He resolved to make a strong impression no matter what, noting inwardly that even the man's name alone sounded imposing. Seated at the head of the table, Velako formally began the council meeting, remarking that since all the influential families of Marcel had gathered that day, he wished to express his gratitude for their willingness to attend despite their busy schedules. Maintaining his warm demeanor, he added that before proceeding any further, he would like to introduce a noble to everyone present. As a result, Johan found himself enduring countless scrutinizing gazes while he was being introduced. Velako explained that Johan was a member of House Yates and was currently sponsored by the Gitana Trading Company. With visible enthusiasm, Velako addressed him by name. Johan could only force a stiff smile and respond by expressing his pleasure at meeting everyone, while assuring them that he would do his utmost. Out of courtesy to Velako, the remaining 6 attendees offered polite, perfunctory applause. Though deeply uncomfortable, Johan remained seated and did his best to keep his composure. Suddenly, the Baron put on a fake smile and impatiently raised a pointed question, asking the governor whether it was true that the mercenary group hired by the trading company had failed to subjugate the bandits, and demanding to know what had happened. Beneath his words lay a veiled criticism, as he insinuated that if Velako had requested assistance from the Holy Empire's emperor from the beginning, the matter would have been resolved without incident. At once, members of the anti-emperor faction loudly echoed this sentiment, insisting that the bandits had appeared because of the emperor in the first place. They argued that the emperor should take responsibility and reduce the taxes imposed on Marcel, loudly affirming one another's claims. Naturally, the pro-emperor faction fired back without hesitation, angrily ordering their opponents to hold their tongues and demanding to know how they dared insult His Majesty the Emperor given the current state of affairs, condemning such remarks as outright blasphemy. The situation rapidly devolved into a fierce argument. The anti-emperor side accused the emperor of orchestrating a shallow scheme, claiming that he had deliberately allowed the bandits to run rampant in order to plunge the city into chaos, only to later justify stationing imperial troops there. The opposing side immediately demanded proof, hurling insults and accusing the others of lashing out merely because their hired mercenaries had proven useless. Caught in the middle, Johan felt utterly lost, likening the experience to a duck listening to thunder. He internally lamented that he could not understand a single word of what the politicians were saying, and that the noise alone made his head ache. At the same time, a different anxiety gnawed at him as he realized that many of the people present openly supported the emperor, and that if his own situation were exposed, he would once again be in grave danger. Despite the endless debate, Velako remained calm and unshaken. Abruptly, he spoke in a low, cold voice, firmly calling for order. The sheer pressure of his authority silenced the nobles instantly, leaving not a single person daring to utter another word. Even Johan was stunned by the overwhelming force Velako exuded. Eon cleared her throat and stepped forward to speak. Acting on Velako's behalf, she smiled brightly and stated that the governor understood everyone's concerns and had prepared a backup plan. She then decisively revealed that this plan involved forming a second subjugation force to strike the bandits directly at their source. The proposal left everyone utterly stunned, and shocked reactions rippled through the room. Only the Baron managed to maintain his habitual false smile, praising Velako as expectedly wise and remarking that the emperor valued Marcel's peace above all else. He continued to needle the governor by adding that all Velako needed to do was give the word, and imperial troops would be dispatched at any time. Hearing this, Johan was genuinely terrified, realizing that if the emperor's troops were sent, he might truly be captured and executed this time. Turning his gaze toward the head of the council, he desperately pleaded in his heart for Velako to reject the suggestion. With impeccable courtesy, Velako directly refused the proposal. He acknowledged that Sir Ainbeck had contributed greatly to the city council and expressed his personal gratitude for that assistance, but nonetheless stated that he must respectfully decline. Using his sharp and uncompromising reasoning, Velako decisively crushed Baron's proposal. He stated that His Majesty was most likely occupied with the recent rebellion in the north and that he wished to lighten the emperor's burden, even if only slightly. Smiling faintly, he turned his gaze toward Johan and firmly added that Marcel would organize a new mercenary force, one that would include Sir Johan as well. Left with no room to argue, Baron was forced to accept Velako's arrangement. After a brief pause, he remarked that if this was Velako's decision, then it could not be helped, and he expressed his hope that the emperor would recognize Velako's loyalty as governor. Among those present, the one who felt the most relieved was undoubtedly Johan. He silently breathed a sigh of relief and thanked his luck inwardly. At the same time, he began to reassess the noble known as Baron, suspecting that the mustached man was likely aligned with the pro-emperor faction. From the way Baron and the governor interacted, Johan sensed that the two were very close, which made him wonder uneasily whether he would truly be safe. His head throbbed as he recalled Eldan's words about Marcel being untouchable even by the emperor, a claim that now seemed far less certain than it once had. Johan then stepped forward to formally conclude the council meeting, announcing that the session was adjourned and informing everyone that the council members had prepared a modest tea gathering, which he encouraged all of them to attend. After everyone else had departed, the only one who remained behind was Baron. Just as Johan was about to rise and head to the tea gathering, someone called out to him, asking whether Sir Johan could spare some time. Faced with Velaco's inscrutable smile, Johan hesitated briefly before nodding and agreeing. Inside his mind, Johan's thoughts raced. He suspected that if Velaco truly supported the emperor, he should come up with an excuse and flee immediately. Trapped in this dilemma, Johan could only lament his terrible luck, fearing that he might soon be forced to wander once more. Velaco walked ahead, warmly guiding the way and suggesting that they go to his office. Johan quickly followed behind, responding obediently. Watching the two figures leave, Baron merely hardened his expression, narrowing his eyes as he silently observed them. Once they arrived at the office, Velaco politely invited Johan to take a seat. Johan thanked him courteously and complied. Velaco then went straight to the point, asking which house Johan had said he belonged to. Though nervous, Johan steadied himself and replied that he was Johan Yates of House Yates, then waited tensely for Velaco's response. Contrary to Johan's anxiety, Velaco reacted with unexpected enthusiasm, remarking that he understood now and repeating the name House Yates in surprise, exclaiming that this was where Johan was from. Johan froze, confused by the reaction. Velaco then launched into an animated explanation, describing House Yates as a rather special family renowned for its northern specialty, date palm-infused liquor, a drink famous among those in the know. Even Johan was stunned by this information, inwardly wondering whether Velaco truly knew his family, and questioning in disbelief whether it was actually a real noble house at all, given that he himself had only changed a single letter when inventing the name. At that, Velaco produced a precious bottle, remarking that the timing was perfect and that he happened to have liquor from House Yates on hand, specifically their signature date palm-infused liquor. He reached for 2 prepared glasses, poured the drink, and handed one to Johan with a smile, commenting that Johan must miss his homeland. Accepting the glass awkwardly, Johan thanked him hesitantly. He then drank the liquor in one go and exaggerated his reaction, praising how strongly it brought back memories. In truth, he admitted to himself that he had no idea what it was supposed to taste like, and had not even known such a drink existed. Velaco remained strangely calm and said that he was glad to hear that. Lowering his voice, he casually asked whether House Yates had been doing well. He then expressed deep sympathy, mentioning that he had heard the Emperor's cold blade had swept through the north and that it was truly a tragedy. Johan involuntarily recalled the sea of flames that had once consumed his own home. Velaco continued, noting regretfully that many houses had been purged and that rumors claimed the survivors had scattered across the land, surviving through banditry. He then revealed a piece of sensitive information, stating that among the purged houses, there was one individual who was said to be wanted on charges of treason. Velaco's eyes sharpened as he added that the house in question was reportedly called House Yates. Johan could only feign ignorance upon hearing this, claiming that he had no idea and that this was the first time he had ever heard that name. Even so, Velaco's gaze remained fixed firmly on him. Suddenly, Velaco laughed, easing the tension, and remarked that it seemed he had gone too far with his small talk, offering his apologies. Seeing the atmosphere relax, Johan followed along, brushing it off and insisting that it was nothing and that Velaco need not worry. Holding the bottle in his hand, Velaco then continued meaningfully, saying that something had just come to mind and asking whether Johan knew a certain fact. He proceeded to expose Johan's deception directly, revealing that what Johan had just drunk was not House Yates's date palm-infused liquor at all, but merely cheap whiskey distilled in a nearby region. Only then did Johan realize that Velaco had seen through him from the very beginning. Velaco's demeanor changed completely. His voice turned cold as he discarded all pretense and suggested that they put an end to the pointless wordplay, finally addressing him directly as Johan Yates. Velaco's words made Johan freeze on the spot. Velaco turned his back on him and firmly declared that he would not hand Johan over to the Emperor. However, almost immediately after that, he cast a sidelong glance at Johan, hesitating for a brief moment as a dangerous expression surfaced, suggesting that perhaps he might do so after all. Cold sweat poured down Johan's forehead like a stream. Frowning anxiously, Johan asked what Velako meant by that. Velako shot him a sharp glare and asserted that all of his decisions were made solely for Marcel's benefit. His eyes flashed with a cold light as he emphasized that no one could say for certain whether this city needed the pro-emperor faction or the anti-emperor faction, and that he intended to use the balance between the two to protect the city. Those words left Johan utterly stunned. Suddenly, Velako burst into laughter again, returning to his approachable demeanor as he stated that the most urgent task at hand was dealing with the bandit gang, instructing Johan to wipe them out, earn merit, and prove that the city needed him. Once more, Velako pushed the atmosphere into tension, warning that if Johan failed, he would be sent straight into the Emperor's grasp. After leaving the conversation, Johan felt as though he might collapse. He slid down against the wall and lamented that he had finally reached Marcel and believed he was about to live an easy life, only to realize that it was merely another shackle around his neck. He worried that now Velako knew who he really was and wondered whether he should simply run away. His face darkened as he recalled everything he had endured. In the end, Johan raised his fist fiercely and declared to himself that nothing in this world was free, that merely having a roof over his head was already a luxury, and that if that was how things were, he would earn Velako's favor and settle down there. Standing beside him, Goiden, who had overheard everything, clenched his fists and encouraged him by urgently calling out that the subjugation force had arrived. Johan turned his gaze toward where Goiden was pointing and wondered aloud whether those were the men Velako had gathered for him. Before him stood the Marcel 2nd Bandit Subjugation Force. Goiden was able to name them with ease, pointing out the Red Iron Mercenaries, the Saint Iena Monastery, and even the Saint Galanto Monastery. He exclaimed in amazement that he could not believe such big names were gathered in one place. Curious, Johan asked whether they were famous. Goiden explained that they were well known in the area, noting that the Saint Galanto Monastery was a male-centered order of holy knights renowned for its alchemy. He continued by describing the Saint Iena Monastery as a female-centered order of holy knights said to be powerful enough to hunt trolls. As for the final group, he explained that the Red Iron Mercenaries were mostly deployed in siege battles, that as dwarves they valued honor and loyalty, and that at the same time they were said to be open-minded. Soon after, another group of knights arrived, and Goiden immediately pointed them out, saying that Count Bartok's knights had arrived as well, describing them as elves from Orangs famed for their bravery and skills. Hearing this, Johan bluntly remarked that elves were usually extremely rude. Goiden sneezed awkwardly and apologized, to which Johan gently told him not to worry about it. Inside, Johan began to calculate his next steps, deciding that he should take a good look at the people he would be fighting alongside. Beneath the banner that had been raised high, Kumal, the captain of the Red Iron Mercenaries, called out excitedly to Lady Eon. Eon bowed politely in response, thanking Captain Kumal for answering their call and introducing the knight from the trading company who would be fighting with them. Standing beside her, Johan spoke up and said that he would be in their care. Upon hearing this, Kumal warmly extended his hand and invited Johan to speak comfortably, addressing him directly as Sir Johan. Johan unexpectedly refused, explaining with an apologetic tone that he could not speak casually to the captain of the force and asking whether Kumal did not need to uphold his pride in front of his men. Kumal, clearly pleased, winked and gave a thumbs up in praise, remarking that Johan was very thoughtful and adding that even if Johan spoke casually, no one would ever doubt his authority. Johan smiled back and replied that in that case, he would accept the offer, cheerfully expressing his thanks. After some brief chatter, Kumal turned and asked how the Holy Knights would be moving. A young woman spoke up to explain that they would be moving together with Captain Kumal's men. The man beside her smiled in agreement and stated that they would do the same. Those two were none other than Valian, the vanguard commander of Saint Iena Monastery, and Agante, the vanguard commander of Saint Galanto Monastery. Kumal placed a hand over his chest and sincerely stated that he, Kumal, offered his thanks for the Holy Knight's consideration. Watching this exchange, Johan could not help but form his own impression, wondering what was up with that dwarf and noting that he was surprisingly decent. He admitted that he did not really understand why the subjugation captain needed to seek consent over command authority, but he found it likable that Kumal seemed reasonable. At that moment, a voice rang out from the side, demanding to know why the branch manager had gathered so many troops. A horse approached as well, revealing the speaker to be Gustav, a knight of Bartok. With an irritated sigh, Gustav mockingly declared that his group alone would be more than sufficient. Upon hearing this, knights of Bartok, Laurent, and Leon, standing behind him, immediately voiced their agreement, stating that Count Bartok must have had a reason for sending them. Gustav then cast an evaluating glance toward Johan, uttering a brief sound of interest before calling out to him and asking whether he was the knight fighting under the trading company's banner. Johan calmly met his gaze and confirmed that he was Johan of House Yates. Hearing the name, Gustav pursed his lips as if thinking, remarking that he had never heard of such a house. He then bluntly pointed at Johan and sneered that they could not be bothered to pay attention to some lowly house like his, warning that if Johan got in their way on the battlefield, they would show no mercy. Johan's expression darkened at those words, and he coldly replied that he would remember that. Immediately afterward, Gustav turned and shouted that the shitty dwarf captain should know that they would not be taking any orders from him. Kamal responded with an awkward smile, repeatedly acknowledging the outburst, as Gustav went on to issue another command, declaring that they should not come looking for them during the battle. Still fuming, Gustav shifted his anger toward Johan, ordering the branch manager to prepare a grand send-off feast in his name. Johan humbly accepted and assured him that it would be prepared right away. Fired up, Gustav rallied his troops and loudly ordered them to move out. As Johan watched their retreating figures, he narrowed his eyes in irritation and inwardly cursed, realizing that this must have been why Kamal had asked about command authority, because of people like them. He reflected that the old dwarf captain clearly had it rough. Still, Johan reassured himself that with their current lineup, they should be able to wipe the bandits out, even if those elf bastards were unbearably obnoxious, concluding that the battle might actually go well. Suddenly, from the distance, Ivelka came running over in a panic, calling out to the branch manager. Johan smiled and asked what was wrong. Ivelka approached and whispered something into her ear, after which Johan turned to Johan and hesitantly informed him that someone wished to see him that evening. Johan, surprised, pointed to himself and asked if it was him, wondering aloud whether it was Velako again. Johan awkwardly scratched her neck, glanced away, and hesitated, starting to reply but trailing off. Time passed, and night fell on the open field near the Marcel rally point, the evening before the second bandit subjugation force was set to depart. Sitting around a crackling campfire, the soldiers continued to cheer loudly, telling one another not to worry about tomorrow and to eat and drink as much as they could. They shouted that anyone who could not fight the next day because of a hangover had never been fit to be a soldier in the first place. Surrounded by women, Gustav lifted his head and drained his mug of beer, proclaiming that refusing alcohol, meat, and women was an elf's disgrace. Raising his mug high, he stirred the atmosphere of the feast, toasting to the scheduled death of their enemies. He boasted that there was no way they would rely on fickle magic and declared that their swords and courage would tear their enemies apart. Lord Swetelga covered his ears in irritation, his face turning pale as he muttered to himself that knights were truly obnoxious. In stark contrast to the noisy chaos outside, Johan walked pensively through a deserted corridor, reflecting that within the etiquette of this world's nobility, refusing a drink could sometimes be interpreted as an insult since it implied a lack of trust toward the other party. At that moment, Lord Suetelga was already extremely uncomfortable, his complexion drained of color as he was pressed in by the surrounding crowd. Upon returning to the quiet tower, Johan raised his hand to knock on the door, only to hear a voice from inside telling him to enter. He gently pushed the door open and took a seat. With lingering suspicion, he asked who it was that had requested to see him. The person sitting across from him ordered him to sit there first. Noticing the bottle of alcohol and the large goblet on the table, Johan began to feel uneasy. He wondered inwardly whether it was alcohol again, questioned if the nobles of this world truly drank every single day, and even marveled at how their livers managed to survive. Remembering Velako only made his head throb, though he consoled himself by thinking that at least this was not the cheap whiskey Velako used to test him, adding that merely recalling yesterday already gave him a headache. The man across from him began pouring a black liquid into the glass and smiled as he remarked that Johan was the noble scheduled to march out the next day to wipe out the bandits, and suggested that Johan's motivation was obviously money. Johan found the remark somewhat laughable and responded by asking who the man was and why he would ask such a rude question the moment they met. In response, the man removed his hat, revealing his face as he laughed and introduced himself as Baron Einbeck, a loyal subject of the Emperor of the Holy Empire. Johan's gaze immediately hardened. Baron Einbeck extended a hand and stated that Johan might not know this, but Marcel claimed neutrality while, in practice, behaving like an anti-emperor faction. Stroking his mustache, he asked whether Johan understood why he had sought him out at this time. Johan bluntly answered that he did not, leaving Baron Einbeck momentarily stunned and at a loss for words. Johan then sighed and apologized, explaining that he was not good with complicated matters. He admitted to himself that he felt exhausted by schemes and calculations, reasoning that getting entangled with the pro-emperor faction would bring him no benefit, and that he intended to keep his head down and leave. Baron Einbeck raised his glass and laughed, saying that he had expected exactly that response. He urged Johan to listen carefully, declaring that he, Baron Einbeck, would impart a life lesson. He explained that merchants usually required two things, which he identified as profit and strength. As he poured more of the dark liquid into Johan's glass, he asserted that if the Katana Trading Company was backing Johan, then Johan must be their strength, someone who knew how to fight. Remaining cautious, Johan asked why Baron Einbeck thought so. Suddenly growing serious, Baron Einbeck questioned whether Johan truly was Johan of House Yates, stating that he had investigated him but could not find any record of such a house. Hearing this, Johan froze inwardly, realizing with unease that this man too had noticed the discrepancy. Baron Einbeck drained his glass and muttered that although House Yates, which sounded eerily similar, did exist, it had been wiped out for treason against His Majesty, its lord, its serfs, every last one of them. These words caused Johan to recall the image of his father's severed head. Unaware of Johan's change in demeanor, Baron Einbeck continued speaking, remarking that in any case, a nameless house was of no use to a trading company. Whether Johan was Yates or Yates did not matter, as the reason he had been taken in at Marseille was because they had seen his strength. Johan finally spoke plainly, asking what Baron Einbeck wanted from him. Pointing directly at him, Baron Einbeck stated his condition. Johan was not to participate in the bandit subjugation the next day, but instead use his strength for His Majesty. He promised that if Johan agreed, he would receive a reward greater than anything any trading company could offer. After Baron Einbeck finished speaking, Johan lowered his head and remained silent. After some time, he murmured to himself about the chance to become part of the Empire's core, to receive formal knighthood, and to obtain a vast and fertile domain. He then concluded inwardly that if he were to follow Baron Einbeck and the Emperor, only dazzling glory and peace would lie ahead of him. This stirred Baron Einbeck into extreme excitement. He pointed forward and shouted in delight, repeatedly affirming his agreement. Johan immediately played along, remarking that it was simply the way of the world for the weak to shed blood while the strong drank it. He expressed, with an appearance of sincerity, that it was only natural for the weak to be slaughtered by bandits, calling it fate if one wished. Hearing this, Baron Einbeck could no longer restrain himself. He pointed at his own head and roared in agreement, declaring that the one who lost was always at fault, praising Johan for having his head screwed on straight as he burst into loud laughter. Facing the Baron's excitement, Johan merely smiled calmly. He then coldly refused the proposal outright. This caused Baron Einbeck to freeze for a moment before shouting in shock, unable to believe what he had just heard. Johan fell silent for a brief moment before recounting a story. He said that a few months earlier, a man claiming to bear the Emperor's command had entered his domain and slaughtered his innocent family and people. His eyes burned with rage as he added that the man had made him a similar offer at the time, asking him to become the Emperor's sword. Johan then stated firmly that he had, of course, refused that offer as well. However, he added that there was one major difference this time, and asked whether Baron Einbeck knew what it was. Johan's tone alone was enough to instill fear in the Baron, causing his entire body to tremble uncontrollably. Immediately afterward, Johan confirmed in a bloodless voice that the man had died by his hand. Baron Einbeck's eyes widened beyond control as he muttered in disbelief. Johan, now resolute and unyielding, repeated that he had crushed the head of the Emperor's direct knight without hesitation, for the sake of the serfs who had been treated like worms and scattered across the ground. The revelation left Baron Einbeck utterly stunned, his mouth hanging open as he stammered in shock, questioning whether Karamov was truly dead. At that moment, Johan stood up, his face darkening as he revealed the truth. He stated that Baron Einbeck was correct, and that he himself was the sole survivor of House Atz, which had been completely wiped out. Upon hearing this, Baron Einbeck's body trembled even more violently. Johan reached out and took hold of the wine cup on the table, raised it, and drank it dry in one motion. At the same time, Baron Einbeck collapsed to his knees, shaking as he cursed weakly, insisting that such a thing could not be possible, and questioning why Johan would do something so foolish. As soon as the Baron finished speaking, Johan crushed the wine cup in his hand. He then slammed his fist down onto the table with tremendous force, shattering it completely. Witnessing this, Baron Einbeck could no longer close his mouth, his body trembling in terror as he wondered how Johan could have crushed both a pewter cup and a table with his bare hands. He then heard Johan coldly declare that he would wipe out the bandits himself, not for the Emperor, and not for Marcel. Johan frowned in irritation and fixed Baron Einbeck with a sharp, threatening gaze. He stated that since the Baron had given him a life lesson, he would return the favor with a piece of advice. It would be in Baron Einbeck's best interest not to tell anyone what he had seen or heard that night. He warned that if the Baron ignored this advice, then the next time they met, it would not be a cup or a table that he crushed, but the Baron himself. After delivering this warning, Johan slammed the door shut and left. His condition at that moment was dreadful. As he walked away, Johan ground his teeth in fury, cursing the Baron internally and questioning whether that bastard truly believed he could say whatever he wanted and still get his way. Suddenly, Johan's footsteps faltered. He sensed something wrong within his body and grew confused. His vision began to blur as he realized with discomfort that his heart felt as though it were burning and that he could no longer breathe properly. Blood began pouring from his nostrils as darkness closed in around him. In a panic, Johan wondered whether this was poison. Only then did he recall the wine on the table. The cup he had drained completely. Johan collapsed face first into his own pool of blood, cursing repeatedly in his mind, unable to accept that he would be taken down in such a manner. In truth, everything had already gone exactly according to Baron Einbeck's calculations. His face was filled with murderous intent as he finally allowed himself a deeply satisfied smile, pleased with the success of his plan.